Yeah, we're working on it. There we go.
Okay.
Great. I will now call the meeting of the California Strategic Growth Council to order. Before we move on, I just want to note we have, fantastic, Secretary Johnson. We have a new addition to our council. Secretary Kim Johnson was appointed last September as the Secretary of the California Health and Human Services. We are very excited to have you here. Secretary Johnson comes with extensive experience working on a lot of the issues that we deal with here at SGC. She has been focused on advancing public health and well-being of individuals, families, and communities that are most in need of resources, especially in the area of health. Throughout her career, she has worked tirelessly on behalf of individuals and communities that are most in need. Before she joined HHS, she was the director of the Department of Social Services for about 5 years. So, Kim, welcome. With that, I'll ask Sean Kennedy, Deputy Director of Energy Investments, to lead the roll call.
Thank you, Chair. Director Sama Safa.
Here.
Vice Chair Frank Cardenas.
Here.
Secretary Karen Ross. Secretary Yana Garcia.
Here.
Secretary Tamika Moss.
Present.
Secretary Tokes Omushakin. Public Member Corey Lucero.
Here.
Secretary Kim Johnson.
Present.
Public Member Nicole Capretz.
Here.
Deputy Secretary Nowaki Shorts.
Here.
We have quorum, right? Great.
Here. Sorry.
We have quorum. Great. Sean, could you share the public comments procedures, please?
Certainly. Thank you, Chair, and thanks to everyone for joining us today in person, online, or by phone through the Zoom webinar platform, or where this meeting is being live streamed on SGC's YouTube channel or Cal EPA's live webcast. I'm here to provide some information to help guide us all through the process for this hybrid meeting, which we have designed with the intention of maximizing access by members of the public. For those joining the webinar online via Zoom or by phone, please note that your microphone is automatically muted when you join. In order to minimize the risk of background noise, you will not be able to unmute your phone yourself. For those joining online via Zoom, please note that the webinar platform doesn't enable video for attendees, so we will not be able to see you. If you need technical assistance during the meeting or have a question about the meeting process, there are a few ways to contact us. If you're using the online Zoom webinar, the best way is using the Q&A function. Several members of the SGC team are monitoring the Zoom Q&A function to facilitate public access to the council meeting and may remove disruptive or threatening content. If you have joined by phone or you have access to email, please email sgc.info@sgc.ca.gov. If you do not have access to email, you may text or call 916-634-3359. If you plan to make in-person public comment, you must fill out a public comment card provided at the table near the side of the room on the left-hand side. Please fill out the public comment card to indicate your name and which item you would like to comment on. Please bring your comment card to the table at the front to my left with the sign collecting public comment cards. When the chair opens the public comment period for your item, we will read the names of everyone who has submitted a form for that item. Please line up to the podium when I do so in order to have your name called. When it is your turn to speak, I will call your name to the podium. If you plan to make remote public comment, you must be joining the meeting via Zoom, either through your desktop or phone or by calling in via phone. To make a public comment, visit sgc.ca.gov/meetings and complete the public comment form linked there. You'll need to complete separate forms for each item on which you wish to speak. You may complete a form at any time prior to the beginning of the public comment period. When the chair opens the public comment period for your item, we will read the names of everyone who has submitted a form for that item. When you hear your name in that list, please raise your hand. To do this online in the Zoom webinar, click Raise Hand under the Participants menu which is located at the bottom of your screen. To raise your hand by phone, press *9. When it is your turn to speak, a member of our team will unmute your microphone. If you're online, you will see a window pop up alerting you that the host is unmuting you. You'll need to click the option to approve unmute. After that, you can begin your comment. If you're on the phone, you will hear a recorded message alerting you to the fact your line is unmuted. Please begin your comment after you hear the recorded message. If you're unable to complete the online form but would like to make public comment, please email sgc.info@sgc.ca.gov. Each speaker will have a maximum of 2 minutes to make their remarks. Speakers requiring or using translation services are allotted 4 minutes to facilitate full participation. A timer will be screen shared. Please monitor the timer and wrap up your remarks accordingly. Whether you're online or on the phone, you'll be notified when your time is up. After that, we will mute your microphone. You do not need to take any additional action once we mute your microphone. Thank you for your participation. I'll hand it back to you, Chair.
Thanks, Sean. I'll note Secretary Ross and Secretary Omashakin have joined. So we'll start with item 3, which is the approval of the August 22nd, 2024 minutes. Members need not have attended these meetings to vote on its adoption, but may abstain. We'll have public comments, then council discussion if necessary. With that, Sean, any public comments?
We have no public comment on this item.
Great. Any questions, comments on the minutes from council members? Being none, can I have a motion and a second to approve, to adopt the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Great. Moved by Secretary Moss, second by Member Cardenas. Any comments? Oh, we don't have. So roll call.
Roll call. Director Samasaka,
Yes.
Vice Chair Frank Cardenas,
Yes.
Secretary Ross,
Abstain. I was not present at the meeting.
Secretary Garcia,
Yes.
Secretary Moss,
Yes.
Secretary Omashakin,
Yes.
Public Member Lucero,
Yes.
Secretary Johnson,
Abstain. I was not present.
Public Member Capretz,
Yes.
Deputy Secretary Schwartz.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great. Moving on, I would now like to introduce Acting Executive Director Matt Reed for item 4, which is the Executive Director's report. Following his presentation, we'll have the opportunity for council discussion, then public comments. Matt?
Thank you very much, Chair. And welcome to a very special Halloween edition of the Strategic Growth Council meeting. We appreciate everyone's attendance and spending this holiday with us. So it's my distinct honor to present the Executive Director's report today, and I want to start off with recognizing some new faces around SGC and LCI generally. So we have our new legislative analyst for legislative affairs team. That's Connor Finney. Connor comes to our team most recently from Assemblymember Alex Lee's office and worked at the Department of Housing and Community Development before that. So we're looking forward to working with Connor, and he will be helping us with our upcoming 2025 legislative session. Also, my pleasure to introduce our Civic Spark Fellow, which is Kenna Davis, and Kenna will be supporting SGC's energy investment portfolio. Over the next 11 months, Kenna will support a range of activities across the portfolio, including Council Priority 3 on housing, climate, and equity. They'll be supporting the Factory Housing Pre-Development Program and the Virtual Power Plants for Community Benefits Initiative. Then I'll say in December, we'll be excited to introduce hopefully a new crop of executive fellows. We're currently in interviews and looking to welcome our new fellows aboard. Moving forward, there are a few programmatic highlights I'd like to update. I will note that the Executive Director's report that was distributed with the agenda had full updates from across our programs. I'm just choosing a few to highlight here. Our first is an update on the progress of the California Agricultural Land Equity Task Force. So October marks 1 year since the inaugural meeting of the task force. The Land Equity Task Force was established in statute through the 2022 budget to provide recommendations to the governor and legislature about how to equitably increase access to agricultural land. SGC is proud to administer this effort in close partnership with CDFA, and we've been truly grateful for their insight and their participation in this work. I want to give a special thanks to Thea Rittenhouse for their contributions and presence on the task force. So the task force is a 13-member body administered by the Agricultural Land Equity Initiative team at SGC. They host quarterly public meetings across the state, both as a full body and through subcommittees focused on grants, land access, land tenure, land use, governance and sovereignty, and natural and cultural resources. Their next meeting is actually scheduled for next week in Salinas. The topics under consideration for that meeting include sovereignty and ancestral land return, land use regulations, land markets, and loan grant and incentive programs. So will be an excellent meeting. SGC staff will provide an update to this council on draft recommendations in summer 2025 and a final report in February 2026, following the transmission of the task force members' approval of their recommendations by January 1st, their statutory deadline. So moving along to our technical assistance and capacity building work, I want to highlight our trip to Imperial Valley. If we could have the next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. So earlier this month, earlier this month, SGC joined the governor's office, the California Energy Commission, the Institute for Local Government, the Latino Community Foundation, and community-based organizations and philanthropic partners for an in-person convening in Imperial County to discuss strategic investment and capacity building in the Imperial Valley region. Secretaries Moss, Crowfoot, and Garcia were able to attend as well, and we're thankful for their participation. The convening was an impactful way for all participants to hear directly from communities and local governments firsthand on community needs and priorities as the region navigates an economic and climate transition. This new civic ecosystem is the start of addressing decades of boom-bust economic cycles in this rural agricultural area and the associated environmental, economic, and health disparities that have severely impacted Imperial Valley's ability to effectively access and implement funding for much-needed infrastructure in the area. With climate change exacerbating existing inequities and extremes, and timely opportunities with historic federal funding and potential lithium industry development, we want to catalyze not just a business as usual approach, but seed equitable community-driven planning and investment that brings place-based solutions to community needs. The initiative brings together 3 different components to accomplish this goal. One is Boost, a capacity building and technical assistance program for local governments led by ILG in partnership with SGC that brings staff training, grant writing, and partnership building to local governments. 2 is Activate Imperial, a capacity building program for community-based organizations led by the Latino Community Foundation that brings targeted technical assistance and training to CBO leaders. And 3rd is Leadership Development for Imperial Valley civic leaders through ILG and Stanford University to equip those leaders with knowledge and skills for more effective and inclusive decision-making and advocacy for their community. SGC's longstanding partnership with ILG and the Boost program has proven its ability to catalyze funding for community-based action in 2 previous rounds. Accomplishments so far from the Boost Imperial Valley program include the city of Calipatria receiving a $50,000 grant from SoCal Gas on climate vulnerability assessments, as well as another award for the city of Calipatria for a California Natural Resources Community Youth Grant, and the city of Westmoreland to apply for a $2.35 million USDA Community Facilities Program disaster grant. So we're looking forward to deepening our partnership and our work in Imperial Valley, and we're grateful for the opportunity to attend that convening. We'll go to the next slide for an update on our Catalyst programming for 2025. So SGC and the Governor's Office of Land Use and Climate Innovation will be planning a series of regional roundtables in 2025 as a continuation of the commitments that we've made at the 2023 and 2024 Catalyst conferences. These roundtables will take the Catalyst brand and concept on the road in lieu of a 2-day statewide Catalyst conference. The goal of the roundtables is to integrate local perspectives into multiple ongoing state policy discussions. This place-based approach will facilitate greater collaboration between local stakeholders to achieve local and regional objectives. And the insights from this series will be brought back to this council and will inform future convenings. SGC and LCI will host a virtual meeting with the stakeholders in December to discuss plans for the 2025 roundtables and have tentative plans for the first of these roundtable efforts to take place in early 25, within the LA area. This work is part of the Connecting Communities Initiative's goal to accelerate community-led climate projects and demonstrate best practices in centering communities burdened by pollution and other structural harm. That concludes the updates for the Executive Director's report. I do want to highlight one piece of the agenda coming up next, which is the receiving item you'll see on the agenda. This is an update on Council Priority 2, and what we intend with this item and all receiving items in the future, should we continue to have these, is to provide an additional opportunity for visibility and transparency into SGC's work. Outside of an agendized discussion or an action on our calendar. We value transparency at SGC, and we want to have more opportunities to share our work. So the receiving item is simply an update on our progress towards CP2, updates towards how we're moving forward on that. And we'll be bringing up more updates in the year to come, but we just wanted to share that report, not necessarily intending it for further discussion. But if this council should decide that they want to, they're welcome to. But the receiving item is just intended to communicate that update. So with that, I will conclude the Executive Director's report. Thank you.
Any public discussion on this, public comments?
We have no public comment on this item. We have one virtual public comment on this item. Emily Bergenio. Buddy, we're doing discussion.
Hauke, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello. I'll skip my introduction for time's sake and just wanted to make a recommendation for the roundtables, SGC's roundtables, prioritize opportunities to host these roundtables on the California tribal reservations. So just making space for that, and yeah, just wanted to comment that.
Thank you. And I'll turn it back to the chair.
That's it. Great. Any council discussion on the Executive Director's report? Nope. So we'll jump on to item number 5.
We can proceed with the consent calendar. The item 5 is simply a receiving item.
So we'll move to then item 6, which is the consent calendar. The consent calendar is for Oh, Deputy Secretary Schwartz. Sorry, I didn't see your hand.
No, I just wanted to say, thank you for the really excellent report. I'm really excited about the Catalyst Conference, and also, really pleased to see this event in the Imperial Valley. Since I started my position at the Resources Agency, one of the biggest things I've been hearing about is just about capacity building. So I'm really just pleased that SGC is really sort of taking a focused look at that part of California and thinking about what it can do to step in and help lead.
Great. So the consent calendar is, again, for routine and non-controversial business. And I'll ask Matt to provide a brief overview of the item and of the consent calendar.
Thank you, Chair. So the consent calendar for this meeting contains 2 items. One is the SALC Round 10, the Sustainable Agricultural Lands Conservation Program's Round 10 guidelines. And the other is a award increase for Round 5 Sustainable Agricultural Lands Conservation Program award. I will highlight on the guidelines that in 2023, this council had a practice of adopting guidelines on consent, and we're returning to that with this item. We did, the team did make and kind of conduct a pretty significant public outreach effort in the development of these guidelines, and we've had a lot of discussion on that. If there are any questions, we're prepared to take them, but otherwise, those are the two items on the consent calendar, and they're fully reflected in the staff reports.
Members of the public would like to comment on this item, please submit a public comment card at the front table. To make virtual public comment, please visit sgc.ca.gov/meetings and complete the public comment form. I will now pass to Chair Asaf.
I'll ask now, open it up for council. If you have any questions on this, Secretary Garcia.
Yes,
Secretary
Mr. Chair.
Ross.
I don't have any questions, but I do want to say, can you believe this is round 10? This is the most remarkable land stewardship program that California's ever had. And it's coming at a very important time with our natural working lands targets, as well as nature-based solutions, at a time with a lot of change happening in especially the Central Valley of how land use could look very differently. And so I just want to say that it's a remarkable thing that the state of California is doing this, and kudos to the team to ever tinkering around to keep making it better and better and better. So I just wanted to make those comments for the record. Thank you.
One else? For council discussion, do we have any public comments?
We have no public comment on this item.
Great. Moving on, we're on item 7, which is a discussion on affordable housing and sustainable communities program.
To take a roll call first.
Oh,
The consent calendar.
oh, it is a consent calendar. Sorry.
We're getting there. Wait. Director Asafa.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, we need a motion.
Oops, can I have a motion?
So moved.
Please? Secretary Ross.
Okay.
Second.
Public member.
Second.
Yes.
Great.
Second.
Okay. Director Asafa.
Yes.
Vice Chair Cardenas.
Yes.
Secretary Ross.
Yes.
Secretary Garcia.
Yes.
Secretary Moss.
Yes.
Secretary Omashakin.
Yes.
Public Member Lucero. Secretary Johnson.
Yes.
Public Member Capretz.
Yes.
Deputy Secretary Schwartz.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great. So we move on to item 7, which is a discussion on the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program updates. And I would like to ask Matt Reed and then Amar Sid, Deputy Director of Community Investments and Planning, to give us the update.
Just refer to Amar Sid, our Deputy Director of Community Investments and Planning, to lead on this item. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
So Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program, we are back for an update. We heard you all loud and clear in August. So we'll go to the next slide. Yeah. There's a bit of a lag on our next slide. Okay. So today we're going to cover a little bit of what is AHSC, Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities, otherwise known as AHSC. Some folks call it ASIC. We'll also cover a little bit of our feedback, some of the information that we've gathered over the year, specifically on a program survey, what our guideline process is, some of our program updates and improvements that we have taken on over the last several months, and then moving in towards some of the discussion items that address some areas that we heard from August. So specifically disadvantaged communities improvements, tribal improvements, and then what we're thinking about for round 9 timeline. So we'll go to the next slide. So AHSC is moving into its 9th round of funding. What you see here are our NOFAs for our 9 rounds. What we're looking at specifically with this program is 20% of the GGRF, or California Climate Investments, auction proceeds. This is a considerable amount of funding that we're looking at from year after year to make awards that generally think about how we're doing infill projects that reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and our vehicle miles traveled through sustainable agriculture, sustainable land use, housing, transportation practices, and program development. Within these rounds, over the last 8 rounds, we have over 200 projects that are increasing affordable housing across the state, $3.8 billion into the state across all of our geographical regions for this program. It is the largest continuing affordable housing fund within the state, as well as the second largest active transportation program within the state. What this program funds is rental affordable housing in a loan type, home ownership, housing related to infrastructure, sustainable transportation infrastructure, and then programs and anti-displacement investments. Let's go to the next slide. Some of the general program details include how this program is really thinking about maximizing affordable housing and those transportation investments across the state. We have an opportunity to invest with a maximum of $50 million on any project, a minimum of $10 million. 50% requirement needs to be of that money going towards affordable housing. Generally, the way this program looks is if you're coming in for a max award at 50 million, we see about 35 million going into affordable housing and about 15 million going into our transportation and other program benefits. Our housing density is really clear in our guidelines, where we want to see space for rural communities and urban communities, maximize that density across the state. We want to see where we're thinking about our access to walkability, so having 0.5 mile radius to any transportation stop that increases those opportunities for non-auto-centric spaces. Within the criteria, we're looking at all electric design, so no gas hookups within this program. And then we're also looking at scoring opportunities where there are spaces for really figuring out how we can get to maximize estimated GHG reduction. Scoring includes narrative, so looking at how communities and project development is coming in together and how they're going to be benefiting communities, as well as the quantitative policy scoring, which is generally transportation components, some of our land use priorities, and the anti-displacement activities. Next slide, please. Within our program requirements, eligible applicants include developers, local entities, which could be MPOs, could be RTPAs, transit agencies. We're also seeing joint power authorities coming in, housing authorities, and many nonprofit organizations partnering in this space. These projects should be shovel ready. We should have site control within these spaces. We're also looking at developer experience. So as a project coming in, we want to see how they've come in with that experience in the past and what they've done in the past. These projects need to be completed within 5 years. This includes our transportation components. And then we're also seeing the requirements on geographical areas. So we want to cover within this program 8 specific geographical areas for priority. We also have set-asides within this program, so kind of layering in how we're capturing all of our community's concerns and priorities within this program. So that includes TOD with a 35% set-aside, ICP at 35 rural within 10% of our NOFA. We also have a tribal set-aside with at least 1 project coming in. And then again, 1 project from each of our 8 geographical areas. Next slide, please. Over the course of the year, our program teams, this is within SGC, HCD, and CARB, take in feedback through the life of the program. Specifically this year, we released a program survey within the spring of this year to garner additional feedback, wanting to kind of reconcile some updates that took place in round 7 and round 6, and generally hear what applicants and partners are thinking about. The survey focused on the AHSC program priorities and our processes. Majority of our respondents, which were about 78 respondents, communicated that they want familiarity within this program, and it takes them quite a bit of time to actually prepare to come in for the NOFA or when the application is due. It is about 12 months generally where folks are starting to prep for this program. They're feeling that the priorities are clear, where there are a lot of priorities and not wanting to see additional priorities. So kind of indifferent on wanting to just expand that space. Some of the top ranking priorities that they communicated were preserving and developing affordable housing, improving connectivity and accessibility to jobs, housing, and services, improving conditions in disadvantaged and priority populations. To improve access for applicants and what is important for them, they want to see that familiarity in an annual cycle or a familiar cycle, as well as seeing advanced guidelines or familiarity in the guidelines from year to year. What improves areas where they want to see improvements or feeling that connectivity to the program process is, again, that familiarity within past guidelines that sets them up for the next round. We have comments in the space where year after year, if there are major changes, it's a considerable hardship or capacity challenge for entities trying to move in through the next guidelines or get familiar with those guidelines as they come online. And then also seeing where folks didn't come in, where were there some concerns, what are some of the challenges that maybe prohibited them or where they pulled back from coming in for an application. Generally, there was some consensus around, there was lack of competitiveness within their own project, capacity concerns, staffing, budget, ability to connect with some of the partners, timing, meaning the NOFA wasn't aligned with their project, or timing, meaning they couldn't get local partnerships or local approvals to move forward. Move to the next slide, please. Within our guideline update process, this program again is activated year-round. We're moving through the last couple of years as an annual cycle, always taking into consideration when we can update this program, that feedback. And generally, what we're looking at is we're garnering feedback from all of our program teams through direct comments, debriefs from application, an award process, from our TA providers, hearing public comment within those workshops. And we start a process of documenting where there are areas that we can shore up, where there are areas that we can maybe condense, streamline, create some ease, look at some policy recommendations. And that happens on a just through the life of the program. As we start documenting this and we prepare for another round, we're also taking into consideration what are the requirements for moving this program forward for our next round. That includes thinking about the statutes in place for drafting our guidelines and getting those published in a public setting. Those generally need to be out for 30 days. After that 30-day window closes, we do 2 public workshops, one specifically in the north, one in the south. In the past, folks have also done online workshops and some ad hoc workshops if those were recommended. And then once we get through comments and work through the draft guideline process, we come back to council for a final guidelines to move that forward for a NOFA. In practice, again, we release a summary of key changes through the guideline process so that folks can have direct transparency on what those proposed changes could be. And so that happens, again, where folks can engage in that key summary of change and have a little bit more transparency moving into the final guideline. Let's go to the next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, through the guideline process and through the life of this program, we start making those updates. What are the updates that we can see moving into the next round? So the teams have been working hard over the last couple of months to get those updates in a space where we can share out. These are just some of the updates that we're recommending for the next round. It includes eliminating the transit-related amenities. This helps to streamline some of the application process, so it moves that area over to the STI space. This reduces the extra budget sheets and the other areas that we need to document, so kind of creating a little bit more opportunity and flex for applicants and the reviewers when this area is aligned. We also see an elimination of some of the program sections. This particular area is still an eligible cost, just not a scored criteria, so it'll be moving into other areas. This came into place where year after year, we're seeing that some of the program opportunities are not being activated for maybe 3, 5, 7 years. And it holds some of the program partners a little bit at odds of how to actually implement some of these programs. So wanting to, again, streamline where we are putting a scoring criteria point on this, but still moving them into spaces where they can be eligible components of the overall program. Let's move to the next slide, please. We're also looking at removing the green buildings from the quantitative policy scoring into the narrative. Again, over the last couple of years, we've seen larger and stronger policy language in place where housing development is green. So moving away from going above and beyond, which we're seeing adds considerable cost to each unit. Again, this will be in the narrative space, just not in the scoring space. And we're not minimizing any of those efforts that have already been in place. And we're also looking for additional alignment as we're understanding that the CEC is coming out with some stronger language over the next year. Some of the additional work that we are doing in this program is we're refining our local workforce to align with some of recent legislation, refining anti-displacement for clarity, restructuring, harmonizing the quantitative policy scoring. We are deleting a couple of additional requirements in the urban greening space, and then also removing and refining some of our language that I think creates a little bit more opportunity for folks to come in with stronger projects that are well-defined and are easily understood as they go through the scoring process. Go to the next slide, please. Additional updates that we're considering here from our partners within HCD, codifying and clarifying some of our requirements for developers. We're also seeing some of the restructuring. This is based off of public comment to have more alignment with MEHP. And this, again, creates more broader opportunities for applicants that are already familiar with other HCD processes to have that similar approach and understanding with the HSC program. We're also adding in first-time home buyer assistance as an eligible cost. And our CAR partners are updating and refining some of our benefit calculator language for clarity and for specificity for our applicants. Move to the next slide. All right. So some of our process improvements that we've refined over the last couple of months, specifically as we identified where there was an error in our appeals process, post-appeals process for round 8. We wanted to see some stronger coordination between our agency partners, so between SGC, HCD, and CARB. So we're strengthening our memorandum of understanding as well as our service contract with HCD. In general, we have these in place so that we have an understanding of what our actual roles and responsibilities are, where we can define our checks and balances as we move through not only the guideline process, but the application review, scoring, and award process. We're increasing our let's go back just a little bit. We're increasing our leadership check-ins. And again, having a little bit more defined spaces with leadership to understand the data behind this program, our past awards that can keep us on par as we move through the next cycle to see where there may be some areas for refinement, specifically if we're seeing some lag time in projects, how we can update those in the future. And then revising and updating how we engage with our advisory committee through the life of the program, not just during certain critical points, but how do we have better rapport with our advisory committee moving forward. And then proposing again additional spaces for our teams to engage further and deeper with checks and balances. So adding in more time for the review and appeal process moving forward. Slide. So for disadvantaged communities, this program has a statutory requirement to invest in at least 50% of our funds into a specific disadvantaged community as defined by Cal EnviroScreen and Cal OEHA, which is utilizing environmental, health, socioeconomic information for this delegation. Because this is a program of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund or California Climate Investment, that is the criteria that we do use for this program. Our team over the last couple years, and then more specifically over the last 6 weeks, have gone through a scanning process of identifying what other tools, opportunities we can layer into this program. How does that maybe change some of the criteria, enhance some of the criteria that we use so that we can capture communities that aren't necessarily defined as a DAC per Cal EnviroScreen, but maybe self-identify as a priority population or historically underserved or disadvantaged community. At this point, we've gone through several different scenarios, and we're not in a space to fully get through that analysis in a near term or near timeline to release our guidelines. So what we're proposing here is for the near term update, adding in a 5-point criteria score for disadvantaged communities and low income communities within a half mile. Again, this is really kind of moving back into how this program aligns with GGRF and CCI so that we are benefiting priority populations as a whole. Long term, I think we can explore the scan that our team did, dive a little bit deeper into that scan, work with some of our partners to identify maybe other opportunity tools to layer into the space, and so that we can get a deeper analysis of how that may impact the program moving forward. And that way we can capture, again, more of a holistic understanding of priority populations as it pertains to affordable housing. Go to the next slide. AHSC tribal improvements for round 8. As a reminder, we had no tribal applicants for this round. We did have 3 projects that started. For different reasons, they pulled back. Some of the reasons that were explained were, again, difficulty solidifying partnerships, capacity, some complexity around local agency state requirements of limited waiver of sovereign immunity, and then some other criteria specifically around either the capacity of the staff or capacity to engage in that partnership development that is needed for this program. For our near-term improvements on this program, we're looking at, again, a space where we can remove that limited waiver of sovereign immunity. This is done in partnership with HCD over the last couple of months, and again, in alignment with some recent tribal housing legislation that came out. So moving forward, we are removing that limited waiver of sovereign immunity criteria. We're also expanding allowable deductions for net density that was communicated over the couple of years, more specifically in the summer, and then reduce the minimum award amount from $10 million down to $1 million. We did hear that some of the complexity or challenges around a heightened amount creates a barrier for entry. Reducing it down provides a little bit more of that flexibility. Some of our TA providers, specifically the California Coalition for Rural Housing, provided a substantial document documenting some areas where they would like to see updates for tribal housing. Our teams are going through that document and finding ways to address those comments, those suggestions in this next round, and some of that is being made. Some of them are for a longer term update where we can, again, go through some scenario planning and figure out if that is something that we can do within this program. So for a longer term space, we're entertaining the idea of rental AHCD from loan to grant, as well as further and deepening alignment with that new tribal housing program that should be coming online within the next year. Move on to the next slide. Okay. So it takes us now to our AHSC potential award in a 2025 scenario. So right now on the screen, you'll see what it takes to get to a 2025 award. Right now, we're in a space of we have made some considerable updates to this program to get to that next round. So if we are to move with a 2025 award, our teams are ready to go forth with a draft guidelines by next week, meet our statutory requirements of having that guidelines being posted for 30 days and engage in 2 to 3 workshops, go through our public comments, and then get our guidelines back out onto our February council meeting. So what that looks like right now is a NOFA release in 2025, applications due in May, and then awards happening in December of 2025. We do miss the SITLAC TCAC for 2025, but an award in December gets us to that next round of SITLAC TCAC in the spring. This is a 14-month program timeline as we're building in the additional time for review and appeals process. On our next, on this slide, we have the scenario for a 2026-2027 award process. This could change depending on what we choose to engage in, where we want to take this program, and how we want to update that. If we're thinking about those longer term opportunities for increasing layers or analysis for disadvantaged communities, priority population, for further tribal housing alignment, as well as some of the other areas that were in the process for tribal increased access, we could see an opportunity for an award late 2020, that should be 2026, February 2027. We would have a considerable amount of extensive engagement with the public, different types of workshops that we can engage in, and then again, that coordination approach with our HCD CARB partners on any program alignment that should be coming out specifically around the tribal housing program. Next slide. And so that generally wraps our presentation on AHSC. I would like to open it up for a discussion with council. As you can hear and see, maybe our program teams have been working extensively through this year to get us to the space again. We came off of round 8 hot, ready to move, making improvements to the program, deepening our coordination amongst our agencies, figuring out opportunities for streamlining our processes and improvements. And then again, really thinking about what can we do in the near term, what's something that we can move for a longer term, and how do we move through these processes together. So with that, moving it out to our council members to engage in that discussion.
Thank you, Emma. If members of the public would like to comment on this item, please submit a public comment card at the side table. To make virtual public comment, please visit sgc.ca.gov/meetings and complete the public comment form. I will now pass it to Chair Safa to initiate discussion.
Great, thank you, Amar. I will open it up for council discussion. Secretary Ross.
I should not go first because there are real experts on this panel. But out of transparency, I'm going to show some of my ignorance. But the one thing I found, even with what seemed to be smaller adjustments, the communication, the outreach, multiple ways of communicating the changes, like as much as we think we do it, I'm always amazed at how many people didn't know it and may not know it for quite some time. So I just want to make sure that we're cautious about how much time, what are all the outlets for being able to communicate changes, many for improvements, but it still is, it's just, it always feels like we've done lots of that. And I just because I've gotten dinged for that multiple times. So I guess I'm sharing my wisdom with you. And on the tribal component, it seems there's like some significant changes that are being proposed, but I think they're all for the good. And I'm wondering about, do we have any additional tools like to help with if building partnerships is part of capacity building? Where are there some other opportunities to leverage partnerships with any types of organizations or academia that already has deep ties there? I'm just wondering how that all works, and changing a minimum threshold from 10 million to 1 is significant. Does that have any impact on the viability of the projects themselves? Sorry, everyone, you're going to have to indulge me if I learn a little bit more here today. Thank you.
Those are all good questions. You want to address some of them?
I mean, I think there's always an opportunity for solidifying our partnerships. Right now, we do have technical assistance providers specific to tribal needs and supporting our tribal needs. So we do engage with the TA providers on this program. We do have two TA providers and sub-providers on this space. Where we're moving forward is, again, finding an alignment with some of our partners at CARB and HCD to figure out how we do this. Like, what are the challenges? What are the requirements that we have to abide by? And then what are those opportunities if we can relinquish those requirements, how does that impact this program? So I would say there's a whole host of things that we can continue to do, continue to engage in partners from research institutions to figure out best practices. But I think we have a lot of content at this point, and folks that are in the tribal housing space over at our partners with HCD and BCSH that are providing really great constructive feedback. Always room for improvements. But again, timeline wise, how do we engage that more deeply, broadly speaking, so that we are covering and getting to very specific needs and meeting needs of tribal partners?
I also want to highlight, one of the stated goals of the tribal capacity building program is to develop capacity both from SGC's perspective and working with tribal communities, as well as increasing the capacity of those communities to access our programs. One of the bases for the funding that that the program enjoys is to kind of build that pipeline into these projects. So it's not everything that's happening isn't just within the AHSC program. Some of it is actually kind of our network and our environment of programs that are working towards supporting tribal communities and accessing all of our programs.
And then just the lowering of the threshold amount, does that have any relationship to the viability of the projects themselves?
Not necessarily, as the project still needs to demonstrate financial feasibility and meet some of the other threshold requirements. What we're hearing from our tribal TA providers was that lowering that threshold creates opportunity for specific housing development at maybe a smaller scale, but still meeting the density requirements for that amount.
Secretary Garcia, please.
You. I have a pretty specific question about just kind of going back to some of the DAC criteria and how we're thinking about that. I really appreciate the ability to think about maybe more nuanced scoring with respect to DACs, thinking about how we can shift from the straight threshold amount. I'm just curious if you could talk a little bit more about that, or maybe go back to the slide, because I'm unclear whether that's the proposal that you're maybe considering actually assigning a numeric score depending on the location, and how we're going to think through that.
So we're adding in, it'll be a 5-point addition for any project that is within a disadvantaged community or priority population. So there's 5 points in total. We see most disadvantaged communities per CalEnviro screen are both a 535 DAC and then also AB 1550 priority population, which is low income or low income within a half mile. So essentially a DAC project could get full 5 points there. If it is a low income community project, they would be able to get 2 points. And if it's within the half mile buffer zone, when you're looking at priority population criteria, it's 2 points as well. And so that space, we're seeing where there are projects that don't fully score as a DAC per CalEnviro screen, meeting that 75% threshold, but also are a low income community, could have a point booster in that space for moving into more competitive scoring criteria. So projects in the past, again, would have disadvantaged community criteria set aside, but not necessarily have that low income community set aside.
And to the extent, this might be getting a little bit cart before the horse, but to the extent there's a difference between the location of the transit component versus the housing component, you would then kind of score that separately?
Not necessarily. So the way we're defining and meeting our direct and meaningful benefit criteria is the location of the housing.
Of the housing component. Got it. That's helpful. Thank you.
Just comment and a question. Comment, again, I think the front end sort of just reminding us of what the program is and the criteria. It's always helpful because we don't look at that in detail. And looking at that again, it always amazes me how this program is really so unique. Unique in that it's not just building buildings. It takes into account, it's really building communities. It's not just housing, it's transportation, it's the nature of the transportation as well. Addresses public health, in sort of the totality of it is just really unique. I mean, I look at the list of requirements and I can understand how applicants actually feel like, oh my God, this is like such a cumbersome process to go through. And that is true as well. There is extensive requirements in the process. But I think we shouldn't lose sight of the end product. 50% affordable housing, just that alone. I don't know of any housing program, certainly not here, that actually tries to achieve that. So getting to my question, given that, I think how important the guidelines are, I think constant improvement is always, desirable, and especially hearing back feedback. When you commented on the short term versus the long term, I just wanted to understand, is the short term sort of directly correlated to sort of the most important ones that we heard from the applicants, or is it based on its easy fix? Just if you could just elaborate on that.
Yeah, the short term and the long term notes there were what we can actually do in this time frame, this fixed time frame that we're in right now, to get to an award in the near term. So if we were to roll out the round 9 any day now, whatever that means, that would be the short term, what we could accomplish right now. Long term, we would need to bake in the process for research, analysis, and then larger structural changes to the program. So that is the long-term approach, which could be an award in 2026, 2027. So needing considerable amount of time to actually engage in that process. Not necessarily based off of needs or importance from feedback that we have heard. Some of the feedback, and I would say some great importance, could be done in the near term, which we have documented. I only shared very short amounts of updates since this is not a true guideline workshop or presentation. What's out there, there is a little bit more in the staff report on what can be done. And then I think, again, looking at that alignment, those are some critical areas that were documented as important. I think important still also has long-term approaches that we could engage in that are not going to be done at this point.
I think this would be good for council discussion. So in a nutshell, target short-term 2025 award, long-term changes, more perfect maybe 2026. So that delay of a year is an issue, right? I would imagine. I mean, my personal feeling is, given the need is so extensive, we shouldn't make the perfect the enemy of the good. The more so, that's kind of my feeling. But I think it would be good to get feedback from council for staff. Secretary Moss. Then Public Member Capretz and Deputy Secretary Schwartz.
Thank you, through the chair. First of all, I really appreciate the work that the staff has done on this. It was really helpful to see such a comprehensive update for us since the August meeting. And I really agree with the chair about sort of the urgency of need. And so for me, as we look at short-term, long-term, it's really important to me, certainly as the housing secretary, as our mandate is very clear about the homes that we need to permit and build over the next several years, that we not delay, that we have guidelines for round 9. I'm really appreciative of the community process that is happening, that guidelines and the survey already has gone out, and you all have feedback that you're incorporating into preparation for the guidelines going out. I also agree with Secretary Ross that we need to be as robust with our outreach efforts as possible to make sure that we are inclusive of people opining on their top priorities and making sure that our guidelines are as clear and inclusive as possible in this next round. But I just wanted to put a finer point on the need to move forward. I also think this is iterative. I would hope that as we prepare, as SGC prepares to look at long or short-term and they're not binary, that there's going to be a process for staff to really be iterating on these guideline improvements over time, and that we can maybe begin some prioritization as things emerge. We've heard from direct stakeholders in our agency about how complicated this process is. And it makes sense because it's, this multi-legged stool that has that's attempting to have mutual benefit for our climate goals, housing goals, and transportation goals, which is to me even more important to ensure that we're incorporating that feedback from the people who are actually putting these projects together. So really want to just emphasize my desire that we continue to move our improvements forward, and that the draft guidelines can be released for public comment as soon as we can. And that, as I said, staff can report back to council how that process is going so that we can provide additional guidance and support. Thank you.
Great. Public member Capret.
Thank you, Chair. I feel like Councilmember Schwartz had her hand raised before me. Do you care? Okay. She doesn't care, so I'll just keep going. I also just want to echo my thanks and gratitude for staff. Clearly did a deep dive, clearly are thinking about every permutation and every community that's impacted and how we can improve the program, and kudos. I really appreciate that. And I learned a lot even on my one-on-one call. And so for me, I'm fine to move forward with next year's award process. I think that's the need obviously is clear. That's fine. Some information that I still would like to see, and I know I am a broken record, so I apologize, but I still would like to see where awards have been granted geographically. I still feel like there's a huge disparity between Northern California and Southern California. I think I've said this before, but it is mind-blowing that half of California lives below Wilshire Boulevard in LA. I think like you can't believe that. But as obviously someone who was raised in Southern California, lives in Southern California, it's not surprising to me, but I think it's very surprising to people in Northern or Central California. And so I just want to make sure, because we all agree there's need everywhere in California, that we're just distributing these dollars as equitably and inclusively as possible. And that includes geographic distribution. So I would like to see historically sort of where these projects have been awarded. And to me, that ties in to two criteria areas. One is about the GHG reductions from transportation. Obviously, one reason we know Northern California has succeeded in this program is because there is successful public transit. I mean, that's just a given. Kudos to Northern California for building that transit. I wish we had. Wasn't raised with it. We're trying our best to catch up in San Diego, but nonetheless, it is hindering San Diego and for sure Orange County, obviously rural areas, obviously tribal areas, and we're just at a competitive disadvantage. And again, there's no blame here. I totally get it. This is the GHG reduction program. Transportation is pivotal. So again, this is not about, there's no evildoers, there's no wrongdoers. It's just, again, the need is everywhere. So how can we continue to think through ways to make sure that everyone benefits? Because like Amara, you said at the beginning, this is the single biggest affordable housing program in California. So I just want to keep doing my due diligence on that and just keep pressing that. And the second criteria that's so obviously relevant is like everyone else has already said, the DAC criteria, and sort of, again, trying to tinker and see how we can expand who actually qualifies. And I appreciate all the work that's already been done. And I don't know how that will help Southern California rural tribal applicants. So it might be sufficient, the expansion that you're discussing, but I just kind of want to just continue to elevate and highlight that, again, half of California lives below Wilshire Boulevard. So there's just, I just think it's critical that we continue to figure out how more affordable housing dollars can get down to the community that I represent. But otherwise, obviously, staff continues to do an extraordinary job. Thank you for all your hard work. And that's what I got. Thank you, Chair.
Great. Deputy Secretary Schwartz.
So first of all, I just want to thank my colleague for her comments. As someone who also grew up in Los Angeles County in the Long Beach area, I do think that's a really important point. I do really want to thank staff, for pulling this together and for being so thoughtful in, some of the updates that they're proposing, specifically the removal of sovereign immunity. I'm hopeful that the changes that they're proposing will help invite more tribal applicants. I just had one question, which is, how did you decide on the 5 points for disadvantaged communities? I mean, in terms of the point spread, how did you sort of, we're looking at our grants too, and so I was just kind of curious how you kind of determine that.
I think simplest put, we're trying to make scoring criteria be on a 100-point understanding. And so when we're moving points around, reducing other scored criteria, we felt 5 points was a good number, not wanting to push it over the edge or under the edge. It also aligns with some of our narrative language that we're asking for. So generally, that's the process that we came up with. We didn't get into a full analysis of how many points we can then attribute to DAC and priority populations without it maybe changing some of the score criteria that we had in other places. And folks, again, wanting to see familiarity with the scoring areas, keeping that is really like kind of couched into that process. So we had removed some particular areas, moved points around to other spaces. 5 points we could, maybe use as a buffer with disadvantaged communities. Could be lower, could be higher. I felt that was correct. And then also thinking about disadvantaged communities and then priority populations, what makes sense there. Folks were inclined for disadvantaged communities, but also wanting to see how low-income communities fit into it. So that was the 2-point space and division between 3 and 2.
All right, thank you.
Great. Anyone else? Secretary Omashak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to start off as well by thanking staff for the work that they've been doing around this critical program. I know it sounds like we're all singing from the same hymnal here from the dais, but you guys have done some great work in trying to not rest on our laurels on this program and see how you can continue to improve it. So shout out to you guys for continuing to work on improving and refining this important grant program. As has been stated already, the chair said, and I think my counterpart, the Secretary Moss, also mentioned the fact that it's probably one of the most diverse grant programs in the state, especially because of how it touches on so many important policy areas and priority areas for us. So if I had a question or two, number one would be around streamlining the grant program nonetheless, about how to make sure that applicants can apply and get their grants in a timely fashion in a system, because some of the comments we've received are about how sort of resource intensive this effort can be. I know the Secretary alluded to this, Secretary Moss alluded to this as well. So any thoughts about that? Also has been touched on a few times already, but appreciate your work around disadvantaged communities and their ability to apply for this grant program as well. But do you guys feel like we've done the best we can do to see the number of applicants increase as it relates to disadvantaged communities? Are we giving our best effort here? And the last question I saw on one of the slides, and I just didn't fully understand this, the elimination of a TOD criteria. And I thought that's what I saw, at least. And just trying to understand how eliminating that TOD criteria helps our efforts overall, especially from a transportation standpoint. But again, kudos to you guys overall on this program and the refinements that you're making towards it. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe a quick response. Not eliminating TOD. We are condensing spaces where we had STI, TRA components in different places of the application. Different criteria caused some confusion over the last round. So that alignment was collapsing them, simplifying those spaces together. It provides a little bit more alignment and familiarity across the board. So not removing TOD at all, just condensing sections together. It also simplifies like our partnerships and the criteria of what they're putting in the application. And then it also does look at, I think there was some kind of confusion around soft costs in both sections, where we saw in applications, one section was allowed up to 10%, another section was allowed up to 30%. And it got confusing on the application side where one was over here, one was over here, but we may have seen the 30% request on this side, 10% over here. So condensing it all together just made more sense for everybody, both the reviewers and the applicants, to have a streamlined process. As it comes for, I think you mentioned how we can support applicants. So we do have technical assistance for application. They help, again, starting in the last couple of months, where they started rolling out engagement workshops, even as we were closing out round 8, already putting out those feelers for who's interested in this program, what does it take to get into this program. Held, I believe, 5 workshops in the summer and early fall, totaling 400 participants in these workshops, going over AHSC 101, transportation components, so very specific areas of engagement, tribal workshop as well. And then also, again, prioritizing disadvantaged communities for specific TA support. So as we go through, we already heard that folks are starting to prepare for this program 12 months in advance. And so they're starting that outreach of like, hey, I may be interested in this program, working with our TAs, they're partnering up and seeing like how they can help that project move forward with that specific TA support. And it is prioritized for tribes and disadvantaged communities.
Great. Secretary Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. And again, thank you for the welcome. Glad to be with you in this esteemed group of council members. Also want to pile on appreciation for the work in this area and for the partnership, especially as it relates to the integration here of climate and health equity goals as we're going forward. And just really, I think, as everyone has shared, looking at the intentionality of the multi-benefit strategy. And I think I heard you say several times during the course of the presentation that you did take and incorporate what you heard from communities in attempting to create some of those streamlining opportunities. So thank you for actually implementing and operationalizing those requests, and obviously more work ahead for us to do together. My other ask is, as this council continues to uplift and share its work, is that really being clear. You're talking about TA and reaching communities, but I'm also suggesting that this is also a phenomenal opportunity for each of us in the roles that we play to be intentional in making these connections and intersections and multi-benefits in everything that we do. So to the extent that we are kind of through this process, having that learning and understanding of how to do that, I think the more that we can also incorporate that in the work that we're doing in our respective areas, the better it will be. And the more that we, again, continue to simplify and make these processes and funding opportunities and investments more accessible to the communities that we're trying to reach. So thank you again for the work.
Sure. Secretary Moss.
Just one last thought. Ahmad, if I recall, in round 8, we had tribal engagement, but folks didn't make it to the end. So I really want to make sure that given that we had no applications for round 8, that we really sort of track our engagement process along the way. So we have a better understanding where people are actually having trouble within the application process. If we're providing the TA assistance now, the tribal TA providers can probably have a view into where folks may be falling out. Maybe there's some targeted assistance that staff can provide. I just don't want to leave it to hope. I want to make sure that we, in fact, are getting our tribes engaged in this process and really recognizing the benefit and need for them as well. Thank you.
That's great feedback. Anyone else? Secretary Garcia, Secretary Ross, then Secretary Garcia.
I had one other thing. Do you want to go? Great, thanks. I just had one last thing, and again, appreciate a lot of the approach here. One thing, some of the things that came to mind at the last council meeting, of course, to Secretary Ross's point, I think making sure that we're engaging folks in some of these refinements that we're making and ensuring that we're hearing from them along the way, I think is super important. And clarifying from a process standpoint, where we're making recommendations to the council, what the touch points are for various applicants to be able to talk to you all about feedback, about where they're scoring, from a technical assistance standpoint, but also from the perspective of making sure that people aren't completely caught off guard, or we're not in a similar position where there's potentially a reliance on an award, and then that's kind of rug taken out from under people's feet. I think that was something that, we understand was a little bit of an exceptional circumstance, but we really want to make sure it doesn't happen again. And so to the extent that we can treat those refinements as low-hanging fruit for the next round, I think we certainly want to see that. And just know that you all have our support and making sure that we can handle that communication as best as possible with the applicants, given how important these dollars are, and how unique they are for the state. Thanks.
Great.
Thank you. First, I think it has to be said, greetings from Dodgerland. It's obligatory, and I have to. Having stated that, I just, with regard to affordable housing, sustainable communities, and our ongoing efforts to perfect this, as the chair pointed out, as we seek to perfect it, we can't allow our attempts to achieve perfection to stand in the way of what is already amazing and innovative. We need to continue to move and to underscore Secretary Moss's vision on this. The people of the state need and deserve more quality, affordable housing, and we need to do this in and for and with communities that can be increasingly sustainable. I understand that staff from HCD and other partners from Secretary Moss's area, particularly since the August meeting of this council, have been especially energized and visionary about this. And I think that speaks, Secretary Moss, to your leadership over there, and it really strengthens what is already an amazingly innovative program. I just wanted to underscore a couple of things that I think Ahmad spoke to, and that is, first, the opportunity to clarify and strengthen our language when it comes to local workforce development, and also to strengthen and clarify our language with respect to our anti-displacement provisions. Because as our chair pointed out, what we are attempting to do, among other things, is to recognize, celebrate, and strengthen pre-existing communities. And one way to make sure that we do this is by making sure that people who are going to benefit from these new developments, they have an opportunity to help to build these new developments. And so local workforce is an important part of this. And speaking of Chavez Ravine, you don't have to look very far or go back very deep into our past to identify areas of unfortunate displacement of communities all in the name of progress. We don't do that way anymore here in California. That's largely what this council is all about. And so to strengthen our language and clarify when it comes to anti-displacement provisions is increasingly important, and our staff recognizes that. And so we want to recognize our staff for being sensitive to that. And the last the last point I wanted to make was in the area of technical assistance and capacity building, whether it's TCC or Boost. What this council's staff does in this regard is obviously innovative. And one of the ways that you can identify an organization's priorities is by trying to understand what do they look for when they hire people? What skills are they seeking to procure? I believe one of our most recent additions to our staff is at Ella. Ella, your expertise happens to be, if I'm not mistaken, among others, capacity building for frontline communities, and Ella brings that to the organization, and I think that says a lot about what this council is about, what our priorities are, not just in terms of the partnerships and the consultants that we retain, but the skills that we're looking for in the people who lead the organization. And so, having said all of that, I think we need to move. We need to continue to build these homes, and I'm heartened that we can meet our deadlines for 2025.
Great. Anyone else? Being none, we will go to public comments. Sean?
Thank you. We have 12 virtual public comments on item 7 and 4 in person. We will have in-person comment first. I will begin the public comment period by reading the names signed up to comment on this item. As a reminder, please make sure to keep your public comment to 2 minutes. Our in-person public commenters are John Moyman, Brian Baker, Eric Tao, and Andrew Johnson. You could please one by one approach the podium. And John Moyman, you may begin your comment.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is John Moyman.
Oh, sorry, John. The mic on? Yeah.
Hey, ready? Can I get a restart on my time? Hello, everybody. My name is John Moyman. I'm an associate project manager at Bridge Housing. I am currently working on the 1051 Mission Affordable Project in South San Francisco, which was unfortunately not awarded in this latest ASIC Round 8. Our building would offer 159 units of affordable housing with affordable levels averaging at 47% AMI. Notably, 25% of our units would be designated to families with special needs housing, IDD, as well as formerly homeless. But not only will this project be providing housing, it'll also be providing amenities and services that are critical through our partnership with the Housing Choices and Golden Gate Regional Center. Bridge has been working with L37, the market rate developer, on this project for the past 8 years, and we are currently on the cusp of construction. To date, we have secured $28.8 million of IIG funding, $9.5 million of county funding, $2 million of city funding, $2.1 million of BAFA, as well as $2.4 million in donated land. In the current CIDLAC TCAC round, our project had a self-score of 120 points and a 111% tiebreaker, making us very competitive and would have allowed us to start construction in early 2025 with an ASIC award. The ASIC funding is our final catalytic piece that we need in order to launch not only Bridge's affordable project, but also the entire 800-unit master plan community tied to it, that the city, county, and community eagerly wants to see built. If forward funded an award in round 8, we can start our construction in late 2025, but without it, we will be missing an entire year or 2 of TCAC, depending on the round 9 schedule. Because of this, we kindly request you all to add our ASIC project to the round 8 award list. Thank you.
Our next public comment is Brian Baker.
Good afternoon, Council Chair and Council members. My name is Brian Baker with L37 Development, the master developer of 1051 Mission. We respectfully request that you include 1051 Mission Affordable in the award of 3 additional projects that you made on August 22nd. We applaud that effort to award 3 additional projects, including the Aspire Apartments. However, the path utilized to award Aspire ignored application of ASIC regulation section 108H7, which requires that once the 50% award to DAC threshold is met, which was met by awarding 946 Linden first. Then 108H7 says the next award will go to the highest overall scoring project, which was 1051 Mission and not Aspire Apartments. Once you award 1051 Mission, then Aspire Apartments could be awarded. One item I'd like to address is the notion that by following Rule 108H7 and awarding both 1051 and then then Aspire would put round 8 awards at 49.8% total to DAC. However, this does not merit ignoring Rule 108H7 altogether. In fact, this minor $3 million discrepancy can in fact be resolved in one of 3 ways: awarding another DAC project, awarding additional funds to an already awarded DAC project, or reducing a non-DAC project such as ours by the requisite $3 million to come in line. I'd like to quickly pivot to the benefits of the project. It's 6 acres, 800 units, of which 20% are affordable. There are 3 acres of open space parks built on BART land adjacent to the site, BART station improvements, new electric vehicle buses for the South City, San Francisco's free shuttle service, 100-head childcare development facility with 25% tuitions subsidized. This project is a perfect ASIC project. And in fact, our score on the objective portion, which is 82%, was the 9th highest overall project scored and would be the largest project of this round. But for the narrative scoring, which is a subjective scoring, knocking us out of an award. We believe that per the regulatory regulations and by the merits of this project alone, we should be awarded in round 8, and we respectfully request that you do so.
The next public commenter is Eric Tao.
Thank you. Hello, Chair Asava, council members. My name is Eric Tao. I'm the managing partner of L37, the master developer of 1051 Mission Road in South San Francisco. We are very concerned that potentially there'll be rule changes and no awards will be given for until 2026 or maybe 2027. We are on the same side as the council. We need to advance housing. We are in a housing crisis. This process is long. We have been on an 8-year journey. We are building next to a single family neighborhood that traditionally has opposed multifamily mixed income housing. We faced stiff opposition, 8 years of work trying to get approvals. We were able to get approvals, but gratefully we're here, not just the 3 of us, but with a huge community of a new evolving diverse group in South City that really needs affordable housing and workforce housing that is close to BART, walkable to BART, walkable to healthcare, walkable to neighborhood serving retail. We are there. We have assembled and patched together a financing package to go forward and build this, but for ASIC. With ASIC, that, as pointed out earlier, we'll be able to proceed. So we have an opportunity. We can mitigate the potential delays and reworking of the rules of a next round of ASIC funding and still follow the guidelines that currently are in place as articulated by Brian about 108H7 to allow this project to be funded as part of the 3 forward-funded projects in round 8 as part of the ASIC award, and we will be able to proceed. Thank you.
Our final in-person comment is Andrew Dawson.
Hi, I'm Andrew Dawson, the California Housing Partnership. The partnership would ideally like to see ASIC round 9 awards come out August of 2025 so that awardees could apply for CEDLAC, the 4% tax credits that in the same year. This would save a lot of time and cost. If not possible, we greatly prefer the staff's option 1 to make round 9 awards in December 2025 and defer major program changes to round 10. Thank you.
That concludes our in-person public comment. We will move to virtual. We have 12 virtual commenters. For our virtual commenters, when you hear your name, please raise your hand in Zoom. You can do this by clicking raise hand under the participants menu, which you can find at the bottom of your screen on the Zoom platform, or by pressing *9 if you are joining by phone. As a reminder, please make sure to keep your public comment to 2 minutes. Our first virtual public commenter is Walker Toma. Walker, you may begin your comment.
Good afternoon, Council Chair and council members. My name is Walker Toma. I'm a Community Development Manager with the City of Alameda, and I'd like to share a few comments on behalf of the City of Alameda to you all today. First and foremost, the City of Alameda thanks the Strategic Growth Council and the State of California for its ongoing commitment to greenhouse gas offsetting housing and transportation projects. The ASIC program has been tremendously impactful to the Bay Area and to the state, and we look forward to continuing to participate in future rounds of this incredible program. We urge the Council and Housing and Community Development to proceed with round 9 on the same schedule as prior rounds. Consistency is key to the state's affordable housing funding sources. Developers plan for their applications for years sometimes, and delaying makes it very difficult to do so. We have already been affected by the loss of the multifamily housing program this year, which has impacted housing applications in Alameda. And lastly, please release the draft round 9 guidelines as soon as possible so that our housing partners can begin to anticipate the changes that will be coming in the next round. And please stick to the spring 2025 release of the round 9 NOFA. Thank you very much.
Our next public comment is Ellen Morris. Ellen, you may begin your comment.
Hi there. My name is Ellen Morris, Director of Development at Eden Housing. And Eden is one of the applicants who received an award in August, despite the updated recommendation list last round. And while we're enormously grateful for the council for committing an award to our project and the others that were impacted, we would hate to see the council postpone an entire funding round or revise the review timeline based on that event. Because these applications involve so much coordination with multiple public agencies, preparations for round 9 applications are already well underway. And we would like to see the next round proceed and receive awards by August so that applicants can turn around their requests to select within the same year. A December award date would mean that the earliest next year's applicants would start construction would be late 2026, with homes not ready for people to move into until mid-2028, which is nearly 4 years from now. The transit projects and the funding already committed to those projects would also be severely impacted by those delays. Instead of lengthening review periods or postponing applications, we would encourage you to consider ways to make these applications less onerous to staff and to applicants. For example, the very first round of ASIC had a concept application or pre-application to determine if applicants would be competitive. And then only the most competitive projects actually had to complete the full application. And I think efforts like that might simplify and expand access to these applications for tribal areas or to projects in DACs. Just these applications are really expensive to complete. We're often having to order over $20,000 in reports to complete the applications or hiring consultants to do them because of staff capacity. I haven't heard expense talked about much, so I just wanted to make sure that was here mentioned as well. Anyway, thank you for your support and your consideration of these comments.
Thank you. Our next public commenter is Christine Anderson. Christine, you may begin your comment.
Hi, my name is Christine Anderson. I'm an associate director in real estate with Mercy Housing California. Mercy Housing California is the recipient of 6 ASIC projects throughout Northern California, and we're huge supporters of this program. And I think my comments aren't going to be a surprise at this point, but I want to echo the importance of having a standardized schedule as well as a quick schedule for our projects to be able to move forward. Like the previous commenter said, pushing the awards out till December could add significant time to our projects, which not only delays how quickly we can move residents into this vitally important affordable housing, but also means that we incur 6 more months of carrying costs, construction cost increase, interest rate volatility. So we would just really like to strongly encourage that the council keep the existing award schedule. And I would like to echo the previous commenter that the process is very, very complicated, and we understand that's what is part of the considerations for the schedule change, but it is also a considerable burden on developers as they go through this process. We order very expensive reports. We pay consultants. We put a lot of effort into our applications, and as you discussed, the diversity of applicants and the ability for tribal applicants or other applicants to access this program. I think considering the complexity of the application process is really vital, but both for being able to move forward quickly and to expand the pool of developers that have applied and are eligible for awards. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Our next public commenter is Sally Greenspan. Sally, you may begin your comment.
Good afternoon, and thank you to the Council for the opportunity to give these comments. My name is Sally Greenspan, Senior Director with Enterprise Community Partners, a national affordable housing nonprofit. Enterprise has been deeply involved with AHSC since the program's inception, primarily through our role as a TA provider. We believe that there are opportunities to continue to strengthen and streamline the program. However, we also know that AHSC is demonstrably effective and successful program that has already been through 8 rounds of in-depth guideline review and program refinement over the last 10 years. We also believe that ongoing further improvements can be made through the regular guideline comment period process, as well as, and this is really quite important, thoughtful refinement of program application materials and the application process after the guidelines are finalized. At the same time, we are concerned about the impacts of a protracted ASIC Round 9 program delay. As others have mentioned, state funding for affordable housing is already limited. The demand for AHSC funding is great, and longer delays mean that housing projects will miss out on opportunities to leverage those other funding sources, such as the federal tax credits. Meanwhile, we also see that many of the transportation partners that we have collectively cultivated have projects that are ready to apply for AHSC now that will, in some cases, become unavailable with program delay. The urgency of our state's housing and climate crises compels us to move forward with ASIC Round 9 while simultaneously working to strengthen the program for future rounds. We thus encourage the Council to authorize the release of the draft guidelines as soon as possible and encourage you to move forward with AHSC Round 9 awards as soon as reasonably possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next commenter is JT Herechmak. JT, you may begin your comment.
Good afternoon, Chair and Council members. My name is JT Herechmak with the Nonprofit Housing Association of Northern California. We represent developers who apply for and implement the ASIC program across the Bay Area's 9 counties. We appreciate all the considerations for staff and the continued work that goes into supporting this important program. And I'd like to echo many previous commenters on timing here. In order for ASIC to align with other affordable housing funding sources and be more effective, we would really like to see the ASIC Round 9 awards come out by August of 2025. This lets awardees apply to the Debt Limit Allocation Committee, or SIDLAC, for housing tax credits in the same year, saving an immense amount of time and cost and uncertainty. If that isn't possible, we do greatly prefer staff's option 1 to make Round 9 awards in December 2025 and defer those major program changes to Round 10. We also encourage you to consider other ways to make this application less onerous on staff and applicants for both efficiency and for broader access to the ASIC program. And we would be more than willing to work with you on ways that we could adjust this program with our membership. For example, previously mentioned the pre-application stage that could save a lot of time and the amount of materials that staff have to ultimately review by the end of the process. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you. Our next public comment is Nell Solander. Nell, you may begin your comment. Nell, can you hear us? Nell, we'll try to come back. We'll go to our next public commenter, Alex Rogala. Alex, you may begin your comment.
Good afternoon. My name is Alex Regala, and I'm a policy manager at Midpenn Housing, a nonprofit developer and owner of affordable housing and resident services in the San Francisco and Monterey Bay areas. We strongly recommend that ASIC Round 9 awards come out by August of 2025 so that awardees can apply to SIDLAC for 4% tax credits in the same year. California lacks a permanent source of affordable housing financing. There was significant volatility in the budget cycle last year, and next year is poised to be no different. ASIC is one of the few sources with predictability and funding. It's critical that the ASIC timeline links up in an effective, rational way to the broader financing system. While a few extra months in the timeline may not seem like much, if it becomes detached from the tax credit and bond allocation processes, it will delay projects by over a year. This adds time and drives up project costs, increases uncertainty, and delays units from reaching communities where they're needed. ASIC is a complex program because applicants need a transit partner, and we are concerned that a delay in the timeline could mean losing those transit projects and becoming ineligible to apply. Our projects have been preparing for a 2025 spring application for years. Delaying the cycle would be not only missing several rounds of TCAC, but also potentially missing the local performance deadlines of other competitive funds that we've already received, since HCD funds are usually the last source secured before applying for tax credits. Rationalizing our state financing system requires that both developers and state agencies do our parts to operate with reasonable deadlines. We act with urgency to meet our closing deadlines, and we ask for the state to meet us with a similar sense of urgency. Please consider our request for an award release date of August 2025. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We'll try to go back to Nell Solander. Nell, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Chair and Council members. My name is Nell Sealander. I'm the Economic and Community Development Director with the City of South San Francisco, and I sincerely apologize for not being there in person with my project team to give public comment. Our team has been working on this for longer than my 6-year-old has been alive, and it is her kinder Halloween parade. So that's where I am today. But I do want to thank you very much for your consideration of this issue. As part of the 1051 Mission Affordable Project, we respectfully request that you consider an additional award to our project, adhering to the published Round 8 NOFA guidelines and based on the merits of our project. You've heard from my project partners already, and I'll share a bit about how important this project is to the City of South San Francisco. As I believe Eric and Brian both mentioned, this is an 800-unit master development composed of 3 multifamily buildings and acres of public open space, a 100-head childcare facility that has a substantial subsidized component, so critical for our community. It's also the largest housing project in South San Francisco's development pipeline, and it's located in the very geographic center of our city, adjacent to our brand new community civic campus, our library and parks and rec facilities, and city council chambers. The project is less than half a mile from South San Francisco BART station. And not only is it half a mile, it's accessible by a dedicated bike and ped pathway that's unobstructed by vehicles. You don't have to cross a street to get from this project to a BART station. The project will also fund the electrification of the city's entire fleet of commuter shuttles and expand its capacity throughout the system. This is truly a transformative project for South San Francisco, and we really want to thank you sincerely for your attention to the issue of the misapplication of the program guidelines, and respectfully request your consideration of an additional award in Round 8. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next public commenter is Veronica Beatty. Veronica, you may begin your comment.
Good afternoon. I'm Veronica Beatty, Director of Policy and Research at the California Coalition for Rural Housing. I want to start by thanking staff and the council for your thoughtfulness and work, as well as the opportunity to give these comments. CSRH has been working to make the AHSE program effective for rural communities.
Excuse me, could you, we can't hear you very well. Could you check your mic? Thanks.
Is that any better?
Start your,
yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. I'm Veronica Beatty, Director of Policy and Research at the California Coalition for Rural Housing. I want to thank staff and the council for your thoughtfulness and your work, as well as the opportunity to give these comments. CCRH has been working to make the AHSC program effective for rural communities since inception, providing technical assistance and recommendations for program guidelines to create sustainable rural communities across California. Based on that work, we have a few recommendations to make the program as strong as possible. I want to speak to the importance of van pools, the RIPA qualifying transit exception, developer requirements, and tribal access. Van pooling has been used since round 3 of the program, and the current suggestions propose consolidating the definition of flexible transit service with on-demand transit service, which would eliminate van pools. Van pools are the only data-backed strategy for reducing VMTs in much of rural California, and we've seen many of the applicants we've assisted with TA use them to great success. We hope to reaffirm the importance of these programs in the scoring of future rounds. AHSC guidelines also require that qualifying transit along pedestrian access routes be in place at the time of application, but there's been a long-standing exception for RIPA projects that allows projects to provide qualifying transit at the time of certificate of occupancy. This has been debated in prior rounds, but remains a key opportunity for rural applicants. We want to affirm that AHSC projects, particularly in rural areas, can catalyze transit access, so this exception remains critical. We also want to flag that developer experience has locked out some of our tribal communities and appreciate the staff's effort to open up the program to tribal governments across the state. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next public commenter is Shannon Dodge. Shannon, you may begin your comment. Shannon, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you. You may begin.
Thank you. My name is Shannon Dodge, and I'm with the Property Development Group at BART, the Bay Area Rapid Transit Agency. BART has been a partner to housing developments since the very beginning of ASIC, and we've received funding as a sub-grantee in all 8 past rounds, 29 projects in total. So we know firsthand that this is an incredibly impactful program, both for housing developers and for transit agencies like ours, and we're deeply thankful for your many years of collaboration and support. I want to commend staff for proposing some simplification to the scoring. In concept, we haven't seen the details, of course, but in concept, we're supportive of eliminating the separate scoring for TRA, for the program category, and also for green building. This simplification is much needed. However, BART shares the strong concerns that you've heard from other speakers today that round 9 has already been delayed from the typical timeline. And I'm glad to hear from your discussion of this item that council members share our sense of urgency. Even the faster timeline option that is shown in the staff report represents, frankly, significant delays to delivering housing and GHG reductions. So today, I'm respectfully urging the council to please consider any compression that may be possible to the shorter timeline. Given the simplification in the scoring, I hope you'll consider whether 7 months of review may be excessive versus the typical 5 months, and that your staff may be able to smoothly and professionally review applications in time for awarded applicants to apply for TCAC next year, which, as you know, is just crucial for these projects moving forward. Thank you very much. And again, we're truly grateful for your partnership in this program.
Thank you. Our next public commenter is Courtney Powell. Courtney, you may begin your comment.
Thank you and good afternoon. My name is Courtney Powell. I'm the policy manager at Resources for Community Development. RCD is a nonprofit housing developer providing over 2,500 affordable homes for low-income households throughout the Bay Area. We have participated in the ASIC program since round 1 and have received awards for 11 developments. We agree with many of our peers who have spoken before that there is a need to reduce the ASIC program complexity for both applicants and staff. However, we don't believe that these challenges merit a year-long delay of the round 9 draft guidelines. The reality is that this program is inherently complicated, and yet it is also immensely effective at creating climate-resilient, affordable homes in areas close to high-quality transit. As was mentioned, the ASIC program is also the state's largest consistent annual investment in new affordable housing, We're deeply concerned about the impact of a protracted delay in the issuance of a round 9 NOFA, and we urge the council to release the draft guidelines as soon as possible and target an award release date in August 2025. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next public commenter is Emily Burgueño. Emily, you may begin your comment.
Due to your time limitations, I won't be free to introduce myself in our traditional language, but I'll share my titles. My name is Emily Burgueño. I'm the head seat keeper for Mathetemi. I'm also the chairwoman for Kumeyaay Digueño Land Conservancy, as well as vice chair for California Agricultural Land Equity Task Force. So my comments would be California tribal nations are the first disadvantaged community within the state of California. This disadvantage of housing and forced displacement has been happening since 1769 with the development of California Mission Prison encampments. Tribal set-asides are not a privilege, but a response to the historical and systematic disadvantages which the state of California has and still contributes towards. What good are these set-asides if California tribal nations do not have access to these opportunities we're talking about? Improving access requires rethinking your engagement. Not surprising that no tribes did apply because SGC has yet to find a consistent pathway to engage with sovereign California tribal nations. Over 100 tribal nations in this state of California and not one applicant. It's not a priority issue, but an access and a capacity issue, as well as others that I can't speak on because I'm time limited. But this is something I brought to SGC's staff, council more than once, the lack of tribal engagement and inclusion, and this is a perfect example. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Our final public commenter is Luis Hernandez. Luis, you may begin your comment.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. I also urge the council to select option 1 and proceed without delaying round 9 any further. But I'd also like to address 2 important points. Firstly, I'm pleased to see some of the updates already in the works, and especially the alignment between the guidelines and the MHP guidelines, specifically regarding the developer experience and the added clarity. This is an important step in the right direction. Secondly, I want to stress the importance of retaining flexible transit service like CalVans. CalVans is not just a van pool service, it's a lifeline for rural and suburban communities that lack traditional public transit options. By providing affordable shared transportation, CalVans helps commuters leave their cars at home, reducing traffic, lowering greenhouse gas emissions, and supporting the ASIC program goals. This service is crucial for agricultural workers and low-income earners who make up over 70% of CalVans' riders. By connecting residents to jobs, schools, and essential service, CalVans makes sustainable commuting accessible to those who need it most. I strongly advocate for keeping CalVans as an eligible transit partner. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes public comment for this item. I will pass it back to the chair.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Sean. And thank you for the public participating here and online as well. We've had a lot of comments around the award for round 8. I know that's not an agendized item for discussion, but I think it's important maybe if council wants to address some significant amount of comments. But I would like to get some, not a Bagley keen expert, so I would need some feedback in terms of procedures, discussions around an item that's not on the agenda. So if you could just elaborate on that. Or
right, I think Doug Bojack, our counsel, is online. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Doug.
Yes, this just a reminder for council that this is agendized as a discussion item, so please confine your comments to discussion. If you have requests of staff for action, that can be brought at a future meeting but again, this is a discussion item only. Thank you.
Great. With that, so I'll open it up for discussion, but I also would like, I think, some of the comments from South San Francisco about guidelines and code potential issues. I would like staff to address that after council discussion.
After council discussion, we're prepared to. Thank you.
Great. Anyone would like to address? Secretary Higgins.
Thank you. Yes, just affirming, I think it would be helpful to hear from staff on some of the robust public comment that we heard. Following up on what the chair said, I really appreciate everybody coming today and online to share their thoughts. I think there were some themes in what we heard, both at the project level and but some issues that were raised. So if you could cover those, and then also maybe the proposed timelines, because I think we heard a lot of feedback on the 2 options that were proposed, but then some alternatives for acceleration. Those were the things that came up most consistently in my mind, but I'd be open to other staff responses as well.
We can begin with some of the discussion on the South San Francisco project. Appreciate the legal perspective on Bagley Keene and recognizing that that's kind of a jumping off point for what we can discuss in this forum. Do want to highlight and maybe engage with some of the discussion around guidelines. So the HSC guidelines dictate and direct staff and applicant activity at the end of the day. The section 108 provides direction to staff in developing a recommended award and provides kind of different scenarios and opportunities to meet council directed goals and statutory requirements. So it is, a complex section, but at the end of the day, that informs what is the staff recommendation that goes up. This council can award beyond those staff recommendations in a manner that's compliant with our statutory obligations. And so long as they are awarded on a competitive basis, which is technically another statutory requirement. So once those 2 items are hit, this council has fulfilled its obligations there. Council was not under any obligation to award any project that was not awarded. I want to be clear about that. And the scenario planning that the team designed in advance of that round 8 award meeting was designed to reach projects that had indicated an intent, to use the secretary's language, that had relied upon the erroneous recommendation. So that scenario planning was designed as to how we could, in a compliant manner, reach those projects. That was all we did there. I want to actually ask Amar to kind of talk about what some of these substantive scenarios are that the team raised.
Thank you. So after we did some of that scenario planning for a compliant award, again, wanting to remind folks, we have the statutory requirement of meeting 50% direct and meaningful benefit for disadvantaged communities. At the time of the proposals and then adding in projects, there was no scenario that we could not pull from the lower on the list DAC projects so that we could be compliant. So where we're hearing is a space where residents and Linden was awarded, and then 1051 potentially could come in next without adding in Aspire, which was also a DAC project. We would not be with a compliant award. We would be at around 47.8%. Adding in Aspire, so residents, Linden, 1051, and then Aspire, which is also a DAC project, gets us to 49.8%. So still not at our 50% requirement for disadvantaged community. We would have to have gone down again and brought up another DAC project that would push us over that requirement of 51.7%. In the space of, again, figuring out a way where there was a suggestion for a reduction on the 1051 project. Again, we don't reduce the project awards because they play the reduction plays an interdependency on other scoring criteria. So where that reduction would come into play could also trigger other scores to be reduced within that project. So again, we don't do a partial award within this program because of the complexity of scoring and how things play out in the longer run. I think it's also important to say that after the application is received, changing that amount does not take place in this program. We don't change any of the projected or applicant amount. It's done so if there's an ineligible cost. So again, those are areas that are not allowed within this program where we can simply reduce a requested amount. It goes against the guidelines that we outlined for how applicants submit. And then again, making sure that our requirements are met for 50% DAC eligibility is the largest concern here. And we were not in compliant with that.
Would anyone from the council like to address? I'll just reflect again. I'm sorry, did you have?
Sorry, I think there was another request to talk about our timeline. So right now, with where we're at today, we're proposing the December award date. So when we look at backing up from December, it is going to be super tight to even get to December. We're in a space where we're hearing requests to stay on a similar cadence, a 12-month cadence. This cadence was initiated by our program team over the last 2 years or a year and a half to get on something that was more familiar. And I think in this round 8, it was very difficult to maintain that schedule where we were having to overlap the development of the next guidelines and program at the same time of the review and the score, reducing some spaces that also alluded to some of the challenges that we had in the award. And so I think with the projected December award, it builds in those checks and balances that we talked about for process improvement, and gets us to a space where we can make sure that we're having communication, be transparent to applicants, that I think is really adherent to what we're understanding council is suggesting. For August to happen, again, we would have had to release our draft guidelines over 6 weeks ago. Again, we have to make sure that we're meeting public requirements, statutory requirements for notice, workshops, and a couple of other things that even gets to posting like ADA compliance. So even to get to even October right now is posing some challenges. I can take it back to our team and see what we can get and maybe communicate where there are ways that we can reduce some time. But at this point, with our process improvements, this is the recommendation so that we have reduction in errors going forward.
I'm sorry. Yes, sure. Go ahead.
Thank you. That was very helpful. Thank you. And appreciate the reminders about Bagley Keene as well. So thank you to Doug. Thanks, Doug. So just staying in conformance with that, but I want to reflect something else that we heard from the public commenters was a lot of enthusiasm, not only about the program and the steadiness, but with ideas about simplifying process and potentially application while still adhering to statutory goals and the housing, transportation, climate, health connection that's inherent in all of this. And just to channel some of that enthusiasm, I just wanted to do have a question for staff. Could those ideas be part of people's public comments to the guidelines? And could you perhaps consider calling out a space for that kind of process improvement? Or is that something that you would more consider at one of the workshops, in the North and South workshops?
I would say both. Yeah. So in the public comment process, we're open to all feedback, hearing what folks are recommending in workshops. That's, I think, a more dedicated space to also communicate that and have a little bit more dialogue and discussion there. So in any space where we're receiving information, we're deeply considering how that may be integrated into the program, what we can do to restructure some of our application. The team is always open to that. Again, where time permits, if there are areas that would challenge the timeline process, I think those are spaces that we'll communicate out where it could not be done. And generally when we release the final guidelines, again, it is documenting where those recommendations are and how they may have been incorporated or not incorporated so that we can show that transparency. So welcome feedback, welcome that in public comment space and in any of the workshops that we do host.
Thank you.
Sure, please go ahead.
One item I wanted to raise too goes back to what Councilmember Capretz raised earlier about Southern California, wanting to put a fine point on, it is by design that this program engages Southern California as a housing development geography separately. There are requirements around how, distinct engagement for Southern California. And I think both can commit staff effort and capacity to identifying through rounds and, sum total, where projects have been funded through the program, where we've seen applications. We've also done some level of survey and engagement about challenges for Southern California developers, and can pull kind of continue that effort. We'll scope with the team about timing and funding, but if there are additional ways outside of the workshop and guidelines process to engage the development community in Southern California, we're happy to do that and look at where those challenges are and maybe have a more structured opportunity for feedback from our Southern California development community.
Great. So to close this section, again, I'm appreciative of applicants, especially the two projects, again, advocating for those projects. There's no question. Those are in bigger picture, just as good as, okay. Oh, okay. We'll have you next, but just want to finish responding that part of the challenge, as again, we have to go by criteria and development process structure that is already in place. And I'm pretty comfortable with staff's recommendation. Based on that, I just don't see any opportunity to, we can't just keep going down the list. Again, being sympathetic, how important the projects are. In an ideal world, any proposal like that is something that resources are there and we should support. But I, again, encourage you to be part of this program in the next round. So I just want to put that out. Deputy Secretary Schwartz.
Thank you. Understanding, just the limits of the conversation that we can have in this space right now, and also understanding, the timeline that we need to move, or that staff needs to move forward on. I do want to acknowledge the tribal concerns that were raised. And if staff, I understand that constantly trying to improve, but, and I understand that you also realize that this is a significant issue, but can you talk a little bit more about, how you're going to move forward with, getting community input on the process and tribal input to continue to improve it?
Okay, I think for this program and many of our other programs, we're open and ready to figure out ways to partner with communities. I would say that includes tribal communities at all times. We're looking at opportunities to connect with our agency partners who have tribal liaisons, as well as new tribal liaisons that have been onboarded to LCI to have more robust engagement, meaningful engagement. I think that is already taking place. I think we can always do more to engage our tribal partners, tribal community members. We specifically for AHSC have technical assistance priorities for tribal entities. I think we can move forward with any round to deepening that engagement, deepening how we do outreach, how we, engage other tribal technical assistance providers in support of this program that are, finding wins and connecting to tribal housing developers. And then again, looking at where we already have feedback to increasing opportunities, removing barriers to this program. So I would say moving forward, those are all on the table to continue to engage, fine tune, update, and again, reducing barriers. I think long term, myself and the rest of the deputies within SGC are looking at our strategic plan, finding ways where we've outlined opportunity for engagement. We've heard public comment today that it's not enough. So again, going back to the drawing board and expanding what that process could look like for any of our opportunities. We do have the tribal capacity program that I think is going to be informing a lot of our processes moving forward on how that actually is operationalized, the areas that they're engaging in to increase capacity and climate reduction in their spaces, and having it be a very diverse program where it's up to the tribes to determine what they're engaging in that particular program. So a lot of things on the table. There's a lot more that we can do. And I think we can come back with some areas where in this particular program, how we're including feedback, what that looks like, and maybe what's not included in the next round as well.
Chair, can I just,
Yes, sure.
I just add to something that Ms. Sid just mentioned? This is in line also with what I think Secretaries Garcia and Ross spoke to. You know, as we reimagine how we catalyze progress in this state through our Catalyst Conference, and instead of having an annual thing which is up here, and we have more regular, maybe quarterly, I don't know how we're going to structure this, but pushing out these collaborations to various regions, isn't that also an opportunity to meet folks, including tribal sisters and brothers, where they are and strengthen our collaboration and our listening and learning?
Yes, I think, again, not wanting to say we're only pushing it to those particular areas of engagement. I think that's what we're also considering and doing. So if we are moving Catalyst to roundtable format, looking at opportunities to connect with tribal communities, we heard a comment of potentially hosting roundtables on tribal lands, always up for consideration. We're also looking at partnerships with LCI to not only have SGC Catalyst, but further out our roundtables in partnership with the greater LCI group. And then we have an awesome council that has great opportunities for further collaboration and engagement. AHSC team is presenting at tribal finance discussion in a couple of weeks. So a lot of opportunities to be very intentional and always and.
Great. We'll move on to item 8. Oh, one more. Yeah.
Second. Thank you, Chair. And thanks to all the public comments and all the staff responses, really appreciate it. And definitely understand the need to build in checks throughout the review process and what that means for the round 9 timeline that you all laid out. Just thinking beyond round 9, I want to emphasize the importance of establishing a timeline that gets these critical dollars into our communities as quickly as we can, while also supporting applicants in meeting the tax credit eligibility deadlines, which I think we heard a lot about in the public comment. Thanks.
Great. One last chance for council comments. Being none, we'll go to item 8, which is a discussion on the 5th climate change assessment update. I would like to ask Faye Mock, Deputy Director of Equity and Government Transformation, to present the climate change assessment with your team.
Thank you. It's my great pleasure to introduce our 5th assessment team. We have Aaliyah Becker-Lowe, who is the Climate Change Assessment Program Manager for LCI, Emily Nico, the Resilient Community Senior Researcher for SGC, and Natalie Obaldia, the Resilient Community Research Associate for SGC. So I'd like to welcome them to the table. Hello. Thank you, Faye. Good afternoon, Chair and Council members.
My name is Aaliyah Becker-Lowe. I'm the Climate Assessment Program Manager with the Governor's Office of Land Use and Climate Innovation. Here representing an interagency team with a couple of my colleagues at the Strategic Growth Council today.
Excuse me, it's probably just me, but if you all could move the microphone closer, it's been very challenging to hear everybody today.
How's this?
Thank you very much. Sorry, it's my age.
No problem. I'll try to speak right into it. There. Is that a little better? Okay. We're delighted to be here today and share a little bit about our work on the climate change assessment for California, and specifically our strategic engagement approach throughout the research process. We're at an inflection point in this program. We've done a great deal of scoping and engagement, and now we're really getting into the nuts and bolts of the research process itself. We're gearing up to produce a suite of informational resources in 2026 that will capture a state of the science about our climate future and to uplift on the ground experience. Previous assessments resources have helped inform state and local climate policies, plans, and investments. We're building from this foundation, and thanks to new legislation, SB 1320, which was sponsored by Stern in 2020, and with funding from the 2021 climate budget package, we're advancing this work and this new assessment to fill informational gaps and improve our understanding with updated information. So now here's the agenda. We're going to share a few updates about the research process and the products that we're advancing, some milestones we've achieved to date, and how, again, strategic engagement is integral throughout the process to ensure that this assessment is informed by diverse perspectives and voices. So I'll start with a little background about the structure and our timeline. Then I'll turn it to my colleagues here from SGC who are leading our engagement efforts to share about that progress to date and how this has been so meaningful and core to the program. I want to note that the map you see on your screen in this slide here, this shows 9 of the regions that we're focusing on across the state in our work to develop regionally focused reports. But the broader assessment also considers many statewide themes and produces new data and original research that will improve our understanding of climate change. Next slide, please. The 5th assessment is now led by the Governor's Office of Land Use and Climate Innovation, but we do this in close partnership with the Strategic Growth Council, the Natural Resources Agency, and the California Energy Commission. This slide shows the core staff at LCI and SGC, but I want to acknowledge that there are many partners at CNRA, CEC, alongside various academic, tribal, community, and expert partners that are helping to bring this assessment to life. The breadth of these partnerships is so important to ensuring that we're building resources that are meaningful and useful for very broad audiences. My colleagues at SGC's Climate Change Research Program are going to be sharing a bit more about this and how CCR's participatory research to policy model and experience championing community partnerships in actionable research has been infused into the assessment process. Next slide, please. So the assessment contributes to the state's scientific foundation and informs climate action, planning, and decision-making at statewide and local levels. It's a multi-year research effort. We generate new data, original research, and statewide and regional summary reports on the ways that climate change impacts California's diverse communities and exploring pathways towards building a resilient future. There's about 50 different research products underway in this assessment that are going to help tell the story of our climate future using the best available and most current information. The suite of research is really meant to uplift community values, to address the state's climate research priorities, and to inform action that helps us build a more resilient future. So this includes an equity-centered engagement process to ensure that the information drives action on the ground, new climate data and scenarios projecting the impacts of climate change in California. We have a number of original research products that address California's specific information gaps, including energy-focused research, other core themes that fill gaps in our understanding about climate change. We're proud to present an inaugural tribal research program that's helping redefine the way that tribal and Indigenous expertise are uplifted through the state's research on climate change. To do that, we're funding tribally led projects. We have a tribal advisory group whose members are helping guide us in building stronger partnerships with tribal communities and really uplifting traditional knowledges and tribal expertise throughout the assessments research products. So all of this cutting edge research will be connected to the needs and the context of different regions across the state through our regional, but also our statewide topical synthesis reports. And a statewide summary, which many consider to be, kind of the keystone product, but is really meant to capture these key findings. And I just want to acknowledge all of the work that goes into producing that summary report. So we are over halfway through the development process. We're going to be offering a number of opportunities to engage throughout the steps ahead, including workshops, opportunities to review draft materials, and the final rollout of these various resources through additional engagement events. And we expect to be rolling out all of these products in 2026, as you can see on the timeline. So I'd love to now introduce you to my colleague, Emily Anico, who is the Strategic Growth Council's Resilient Communities Senior Researcher, to share more about our engagement process specifically and some of the major achievements to date. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Emily Anico, and I work at SGC as part of the 5th Assessment Team. Next slide, please. So as Aaliyah mentioned, the SGC participatory research to policy model is foundational for the community-driven research process that informs the assessment. For some background context, SGC's climate change research program allocated $34 million across 3 rounds of community-based research projects focused on reducing carbon emissions, clean energy adaptation, and resiliency. Through this model emerged the participatory research to policy model that we're adapting for the 5th assessment. To do this, we're prioritizing community engagement at all stages of the research process, including the scoping, development, and eventual dissemination of the 5th assessment's findings. In practice, this has included some of the highlights you see on this slide, like hosting in-person workshops. And I'd like to highlight, in light of some of the comments from today's meeting, that we partnered with the Yurok tribe to host our North Coast workshop last year. Virtual listening sessions throughout the state. We partnered with community-based organizations in each region to deliver these workshops. And we're building the capacity of our author teams to build on this momentum and continue uplifting community priorities throughout the report development process. What you don't see on this slide is the groundwork we did before even going out into communities, like having tribal consultations, expert roundtables, interagency working sessions, and a public request for information, to name a few. The purpose of this engagement is not to check a box, but to really strengthen the entire assessment program. Communities are experiencing climate impacts at more frequent and unprecedented rates. Engaging with them directly on the ground to understand their lived experiences, learning from local partners, and speaking to practitioners about what questions they need answered is essential for ensuring that we're producing an assessment that is useful and accessible for diverse audiences. We're also approaching this work through a lens of long-term partnerships, thinking about everybody who contributes to or uses the assessment as long-term partners, informing the scientific foundation of the state, as opposed to a one-time audience that we invite to read the report once it's published. That's why many of our initial workshop partners, the 13 referenced on this slide, are now part of our author teams. The author teams across the regional and topical reports are already building on these engagement efforts to continue connecting with communities throughout the development of the reports. And there are ongoing and upcoming opportunities to contribute to this effort, which we'll share later in this presentation. Next slide, please. As a result of our engagement, we've been able to establish 9 regional author teams, which include academics, community advisors, and other contributors. We've also begun scoping and selecting author teams for 4 statewide topical reports on racial equity and climate justice, climate-induced human displacement and migration, climate impacts to the economy, and tribal and Indigenous communities.
For each of these reports, we'll be standing up technical advisory committees to ensure that the reports include key perspectives and expertise throughout the state. We're especially grateful to our state agency partners who not only participate in our collaboration opportunities and provide essential feedback for the development of the assessment, but several of who are also leading the development of additional topical reports. These include reports on public health, biodiversity, public trust lands, emergency management, water adaptation, and science-driven decision-making. All of this work is building on a portfolio of new data and original research products that my colleague Natalie will now discuss.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Emily. Hello, my name is Natalie Obaldia. Is that better? I'm Natalie Obaldia. I've been working with this wonderful team for the past 2 years, and I'm so proud to present our work today. CNRA and CEC have been key partners in producing original climate research through the Energy Reports, Core Climate Research Program, and Tribal Research Grant Program. These partnerships are essential to ensuring the assessment drives new information forward and that key findings are shared throughout the regional and statewide reports. Funded by CEC, the assessment includes detailed projections about future climate, sea levels, water systems, and wildfire risks. These can be accessed in the CalAdapt Analytics engine. CEC's research has been instrumental in providing the information needed to support a reliable, resilient, and cost-effective move to 100% clean energy. Earlier this year, CNRA's Core Climate Research Program awarded 15 projects to fill gaps in our understanding of climate change impacts and adaptation in California. Lastly, CEC's Tribal Research Grant Program is investing in tribally led climate change research initiatives, and 8 projects were awarded in round 1 and 11 projects are in review for round 2. Next slide, please. Upcoming opportunities. A priority of the assessment is to not recreate the wheel. We want to uplift the best and most current information and welcome your input on how we can align with the resources that your organizations and partners are producing to better understand and take action on climate change impacts. Another priority of the assessment is to be strategic and coordinated in our engagement approach. We welcome partnership as we work with California's diverse communities to ensure we are building strong relationships with residents of the state and reducing engagement burnout. Next slide, please. Right, we'd now like to open up the discussion around how the assessment can support your priorities and opportunities for collaboration. Our first question is, how can we best uplift your organization's climate priorities and existing resources in the fifth assessment? And what engagement opportunities do you have planned in the coming year that we can highlight the fifth assessment's opportunities for input, review, and collaboration? And one key point that comes to mind is last year we collaborated with CNRA on a couple of workshops, went out around communities across the state and gathered feedback on both the assessment and the California adaptation strategy. We'll now turn it back to Matt and Chair Acefa to welcome input from the council. Thank you.
Thanks to the team. And I want to recognize and just appreciate their effort in bringing this great work to the council and sharing it in this forum. So thank you for sharing this with us. Following Sean's reminder on public comment, we'll hand it to the council for discussion.
If members of the public would like to comment on this item, please submit a public comment card at the front table. To make virtual public comment, please visit sgc.ca.gov/meetings and complete the public comment form. I'll now pass it back to Chair Acefa to initiate discussion.
Thank you, team. Wonderful overview and presentation. This is an incredible engaged work that really brings cross-agency collaboration, as well as significant amount of participants from outside, and also obviously very important work because California is the only state in the country that does this. Actually, one of 3 in the world, the US government and the International Panel on Climate Change. So the 3 entities that conduct climate change assessment. So it's another sort of unique California output. I'll open it up to council discussion. Secretary Ross.
Not being shy, but wanting to take full advantage of this great work. and look at ways at how we can help leverage it from the Department of Food and Agriculture. And I know that everybody works very closely with our Deputy Secretary, Virginia Jameson, on climate and working lands. But we are in a very ambitious project. Thanks so much for all those good comments, Lucy. An ambitious project that we don't believe has been done by California before, which is a standalone California Agricultural Climate Resiliency Plan. And it's really looking at over the next decade. There's going to be tremendous changes. There's a lot of fast things happening within the agricultural sector. And there's individual chapters. And so I see how a lot of your research projects are going to be informative for that, but it's also through our process of outreach and public comment that there could be opportunities to highlight some of the work and the ways that you're looking for to lift up the climate assessment and the projects that you're funding. So I'd really love it if we could look at that. The other thing is we're also working concurrently with UC Ag and Natural Resources and the CSU Agricultural Research Institute, really looking at kind of a master plan for agricultural science, technology, and research over the next couple of decades. And that could identify some projects that won't get done in the timeline of this. But really, it's all tied to how do we continue to build resiliency within agriculture and continue to contribute so many unique products that are only grown in California for this nation, and ensure that we have the productivity so that every citizen has access to the best and healthiest food for the best health outcomes possible. And so I just feel that there's a lot of ways to tie in this work across agencies, and I'm really excited about what you're doing. Thanks.
Secretary Johnson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the efforts that you're doing. It's great to see the council's focus on that participatory research to policy model. And just really want to highlight, I heard you clearly say there, government to government consultation with tribes, which is a critical component of the work, and want to lift that up and call that out. Just in terms of really truly valuing lived experience, not just around engagement, but really taking what those are impacted are sharing and lifting that up. I also just want to appreciate that at California Health and Human Services Agency and the Department of Public Health, we're privileged to lead the development of the Fifth Assessment's Public Health Report, working in consultation and collaboration with many different state agencies. We've convened an interagency work group to collaborate on the development of this report, and we've been meeting on a monthly basis since April. So looking forward to really synthesizing existing literature and resources on the current and projected health outcomes associated with climate change, and providing metrics that can be tracked and compared over time to measure progress towards resilience to the health equity impacts in climate. And I also want to share an invitation for the public and others to participate in a public workshop via the California Climate Action Team Public Health Work Group. And that's with Public Health hosting in partnership with CARB. That's going to be next week on November 7th from 1 to 3 p.m. And we'll provide an overview of this change assessment in the report and highlight how these resources can support local, regional, tribal, and statewide planning. So we'll make sure either through the links, but this information is readily accessible to those who'd like to participate and can register to participate, and really appreciate the partnership.
Secretary Musavi.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks so much for the presentation on all the great work you all are doing. I just wanted to say that, in the transportation space, we have heavily relied on the resources and the work out of LCI and the interagency team on the climate change assessment. Caltrans has been doing a lot of work on climate assessment themselves through vulnerability assessments and adaptation reports and whatnot. And the climate change assessment plays a key role in the resources that are used in the work that they do. I just also wanted to raise an upcoming body of work that we'll be doing that I think is very synergistic with this, and we'll be using the fifth climate change assessment work to leverage that work and the work that we're doing. We just actually today released a draft set of new actions for public comment for our climate action plan for transportation infrastructure, also known as CAPDI. We're going through an update to that plan that came out in 2021. And one of the new actions that we're proposing is for Caltrans to create a comprehensive climate adaptation planning and delivery framework for transportation projects at Caltrans. So these resources, the work that you all are doing, the engagement and collaboration with you all will be critically important in that work. So just wanted to bring that to this space. And thank you again for all your work.
Very good.
It's so great to hear from all of you today, and your enthusiasm is so clear. But this is a really big body of work, and thank you for leading it. Appreciate the note about the worldwide importance of this and uniqueness of what you're doing. So in celebration of you, thanks for being here. I wanted to reflect on, the ways that we've talked about here as a council, and the governor has spoken about the ways that housing is part of our climate strategy. And so I think there's an opportunity to embed some of that approach within the research that you're leading. There is a need for ongoing research to deepen the ways that we're thinking about housing as part of our climate strategy. While I'm not necessarily suggesting a new chapter, I promise, but we would be happy to lend any of our staff or expertise or partnership if that feels helpful. But just wanted to, and it's a few slides back, but showing the different state team research projects, I'd just offer that there's housing implications in many of those. The connection between housing and public health, the need for thinking about emergency response and management, which Secretary Johnson knows very well for her time as Director Johnson, where she was leading the sheltering response immediately after disaster in places where there's already not enough housing. And so to the chapter on climate displacement and migration, those things start to connect all of those things together through public health urgency. Also, emergency response and housing is one of those nexus points. So wanted to offer that. I think that thinking about the ways that housing connects within, you could consider how there are concerns within the existing housing stock and the ways that we're planning for and building for resiliency of future housing needs, everything from sheltering all the way through permanent housing. I'd be remiss to not lift up the ways that transit-oriented development, land use intensification can be ways that we can build more resiliently in infill areas. And thinking about satisfying multiple goals in not only responding to climate change, but withstanding the impacts. In terms of engagement opportunities, we would welcome additional conversation. Our contacts would be your contacts to the ways that we could do this and deepen the work. We will be updating the statewide housing plan. There's a plan on homelessness as well, and a state action plan there, which Secretary Moss and Secretary Johnson co-chair an interagency council there. And I'd just lift up that in some of our climate plans, the adaptation plan, the extreme heat action plan, we've worked hard as a state team to center the needs of people who are living or working outside. And so to not lose sight of folks who are unhoused, farm workers, and other people who feel the impacts of climate change and really don't have a safe place for respite due to the conditions of housing that they're living in and more. So thank you, and let us know what we can do to help. Oh my goodness. So sorry, my team will be very mad if I don't mention the ways that you're embedding tribal knowledge and engagement into this. And that is a really important note. And thank you for the steps you've taken so far. And we know that that was in the fourth assessment, but to see you deepen that work as well and much more intentionally deserves thanks.
Great feedback. Public Member Cardenas.
Thank you. Much appreciation for the wisdom that's inherent in the participatory research model and your wisdom in centering that in your methodological approach. I'm wondering, have you noted any kind of evolution in the sense of awareness, urgency, and energy around what's happening, what's going to happen, what we need to do to prepare for this? And has that informed, Alea in particular, your suggestion at the opening that we are at a moment of inflection here?
Thank you for that question. I think the evolution in awareness is a deeper recognition that the climate has changed. So part of our work is to acknowledge that and to uplift those stories those examples and the lived experience, but use that to further our understanding of how we can take action for the future. So we're matching that with this ability to project through modeling and through research what we anticipate those changes and further impacts to be between now and the end of the century, and kind of create this more holistic narrative of what the experience is today, what it's been, and how we see that evolving over time.
Yes, Lucy, thanks.
Thank you so much for this presentation. Really appreciate it, and really exciting to see the inaugural tribal research program and the focus throughout the whole fifth assessment on equity-centered engagement and how exciting that is. Deputy Secretary Kurgan shared about housing as a climate strategy, and I just want to uplift the research that the Air Resources Board is doing on that topic and in collaboration with all of our state agency partners. So really exciting to think about how we can include that in the fifth assessment. And also one thing I wanted to note on engagement opportunities, the Air Resources Board and Cal EPA are going to be leading some outreach for the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan, which is being developed as part of a US EPA Climate Pollution Reduction Grants Program deliverables. So we're planning some in-person and virtual meetings for the first half of 2025, which could be a great opportunity to highlight some of the ways to engage in the fifth assessment process. And also really exciting to hear earlier from Matt about the Reimagine Catalyst program for 2025 and opportunities to integrate local perspectives into state policy. And I was just thinking that this seems like a great opportunity for those to align and really take advantage of that place-based collaboration. Thank you.
Oh, Deputy Secretary Schwartz, you're up.
Thank you. I just really wanted to thank you for the presentation, and let you know how excited we are at CNRA and ready to provide any support you need. This really touches on so much of the work that we do at CNRA, from access to the coast to wildfires. It just really is just all over our portfolios. So, please let us know what you need, and thank you very much.
Well, I don't have much to add. I'm very appreciative, as within land use and climate innovation within our own office, the collaboration between SGC and the state planning policy development is great to see. And then from there, using SGC's engagement with all other agencies, I think that's the right approach, and I'm very appreciative of that. And continue the work. It looks like it takes a long time, but it is such a critical work, and that's what will inform the next 5-10 years of both investment and our focus areas, especially the science as much as the tribal knowledge. I think both are going to be critical resources as we tackle climate change. So thank you for your work on this. We will go now to public comments.
Thank you. We have 2 virtual commenters on this item. When you hear your name, please raise your hand in Zoom. You can do this by clicking Raise Hand under the Participants menu, which you can find at the bottom of your screen on the Zoom platform, or by pressing *9 if you are joining by phone. A reminder, you have 2 minutes for your comments. Our first virtual public commenter is Emily Burgueño. Emily, you may begin your comment. Emily, can you hear us? Okay, we will move to our second commenter. Our second public commenter is Angie Hacker. Angie, you may begin your comment.
Hi there, Angie Hacker, and hello to all the council members. Today I'm here with Prosper Sustainably. I'm also here with SEAT, California Climate and Energy Collaborative, role I play as statewide best practices coordinator, and also as lead consultant on several different tribal initiatives, including the Tribal Energy and Climate Collaborative. all of these initiatives are thinking about ways to streamline engagement with tribal and local communities. We've been trying to find ways to sort of reverse engineer the process so that community folks are more able to participate and be more active, that a broader and more inclusive set of community members can participate, and thinking about how we might bring together multiple agencies at the same time in some cases when we come into community and make it easier for folks to both participate and make it less difficult for the agencies that are working really hard to engage with communities to not have to necessarily reinvent the wheel each time. And so I love working with all of your agencies. I have the opportunity to work with so many of the representatives from each agency on energy, climate, and land use issues, and they're doing really good work and really hard work. And more, I think, really trying to collaborate and coordinate across each other. One of the things that we are lifting up is something we are calling the State and Local Energy and Climate Coordination, which has been meetings over the last year and a half, bringing local, kind of building a bridge of communication and solutions between state and local entities, and it's going well. And you know, the language on that bridge, or the lanes on that bridge, really are engagement and technical assistance and funding and all sorts of priorities that really benefit from our coordination. We are actually building regional convenings over the next year and happy to work with Strategic Growth Council and LCI on that process, and would really welcome the climate assessment to participate in those convenings, and we would love to make it easier for you to reach community. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie. We'll move back to Emily Burgueño. Emily, can you hear us?
Okay. Yes, all right. So I introduced myself before, and it sounds like some great work that's been in the process. I haven't heard too much about the climate assessment, so I have, a lot of questions, a lot of recommendations. You had mentioned hosting a workshop up north with the Yurok tribe, which is great. They are the largest nation in California, so maybe prioritizing some smaller nations that go unrecognized or unserved. Quite often, Yurok has a large capacity when it comes to the work that they do. So it's great that you started there. I just want to learn more, uplifting the traditional ecological knowledge that has stewarded its lands since time immemorial, and ensuring that that has a space within your framework. But San Diego has the most tribal nations in the state as well as the country. So I'm intrigued as to how many of the 18 tribal nations in San Diego are included or participating with your assessment. Like I said, I haven't heard of this much, and I work with all 12 Kumeyaay bands and their leadership. So I can be a avenue in getting the information to them, and that's why I keep commenting the comments that I'm reiterating on each presentation that has been spoken about today. So thank you, Sean, and everybody in the room. Happy Halloween.
Thank you, Emily. That concludes public comment for this item. I will pass it back to the chair.
Great, thank you for those comments. We'll move to the last agenda item, which is public comments. This is for to take public comments for matters not on the agenda. And unfortunately, this one is not for a forum to discuss or dialogue, but any comments or questions will be addressed by staff subsequently. So with that, we have any.
We have one virtual commenter on this item. When you hear your name, please raise your hand in Zoom. You can do this by clicking raise hand under the participants menu, which you can find at the bottom of your screen on the Zoom platform, or by pressing *9 if you are joining by phone. Our only virtual commenter is Wendell Wesley Jr. Wendell, can you hear us? Wendell, are you there?
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you. You may begin your
Hello?
comment. Wendell?
Yes, hello?
Yes, we can hear you. You may begin your comment.
Since you can also press them. Hello?
We can hear you.
Okay, good. Sorry, I was having some technical difficulties. Yeah, I thought I missed my time earlier, and so I was a little unprepared. I really wanted to talk about the housing portion because I live in Bakersfield, Kern County, and there's a lot of open land here, and we were blessed to be awarded some things, and we're seeing having the blessings of that right now. So I want to thank everyone involved in government and state that makes these things happen for all of us. But what I wanted to say was I really get the grasp of having transportation and housing come together. And this is the perfect area. I grew up in Santa Clara County. I'm 64 now. So I saw the light rail go in. I saw where they put the light rail tracks, and it made sense to me that it was at the colleges and it was at the convention centers and it was at all the places that you needed to be and needed to go. And we are so far behind. Most of the leaders here don't really get it. So anything you guys can do to help, I'm doing what I can here on my end. But this is a perfect area. I even see how we can, by using shipping containers, and my goal, my plan with my business, Smart Play Builders, we will use shipping containers. We will use labor from the prison. I would like to be able to pay them more and maybe defer some of their costs so that they don't go back into prison. But that is cheaper way of building homes than conventional right now. And plus you're using prison labor. It's like workforce. They learn a trade and less chance of them going back in. So all this stuff is connection. Plus, when you build the housing with the transportation, you have this beautiful air quality. And I know I'm out of time, but I just want to thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. That concludes public comment with this item. I'll pass it back to the chair.
Great. Well, thank you, council members, SGC staff. Again, another wonderful meeting. And I also want to thank all the support staff from multiple offices, Lisa, Camille R, Camille F, Caleb, Cora, Kina, and Tessa. Thank you for all your support. So with that, this meeting is adjourned, and happy Halloween and happy holidays to all. Thanks.